The crystal champagne flute shattered against marble as Sienna Lancaster stood frozen on the grand staircase, her billion-dollar empire crumbling in real time while 300 guests watched in silence. Below her, a man in a server's uniform stepped forward through the crowd, not to serve, but to destroy every carefully constructed lie that had brought them both to this moment. What no one in that ballroom knew was that the quiet single father clearing tables had once commanded stages across Europe, that the CEO, drowning in her own success, had been suffocating for years, and that tonight, two broken souls would either save each other or burn together in front of everyone who mattered. If you want to see how far a story can travel when two people refuse to stay hidden, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. Now let me show you how it really began. The Metropolitan Grand Ballroom smelled like money and lies. Damien Vale kept his head down as he maneuvered through the glittering crowd, balancing a tray of champagne flutes that probably cost more than his rent. The tuxedo they'd given him was too tight across the shoulders, the bow tie already irritating his neck, but he'd learned years ago that discomfort was just another word for survival. Around him, the city's elite circulated like sharks in designer clothing, their laughter sharp and performative, their smiles practiced to perfection. He'd been working these events for 18 months now, long enough to recognize the patterns, long enough to become invisible. "Excuse me." A woman in diamonds didn't look at him as she plucked two glasses from his tray. "Finally, the service here is appalling." Damien said nothing. He never did. The Lancaster Global Annual Charity Gala was the crown jewel of the city's social calendar, an evening where the powerful pretended to care about the powerless, where seven-figure donations bought headlines and tax deductions, where everyone who mattered gathered to see and be seen. The ballroom itself was a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars, ice sculptures melting slowly into kidney-shaped pools, a string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner like background noise. Damien had once performed in rooms like this. Different life, different name, different world. "Daddy?" He turned to find his daughter's face pressed against the glass doors leading to the service corridor. Mira was supposed to be in the staff break room with the event coordinator's teenage son, watching movies on someone's iPad. She was 7 years old, gap-toothed and fierce, with dark curls that refused to be tamed and eyes that saw too much. Damien glanced around quickly, then slipped through the doors. "Baby, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." Mira held up a drawing she'd made on the back of someone's discarded invitation. "I drew the fancy lady." The sketch was surprisingly good, a woman in a gown standing alone, her face turned away from a crowd of people. Even in crayon, there was something haunting about the isolation. "Which fancy lady?" "The sad one. The one everyone's scared of." Damien looked back through the glass. The ballroom was packed with sad people and scared people, most of them too wealthy to admit either condition. But his daughter had always been able to see what adults worked hard to hide. "You should go back to the break room, Mira. I'm working." "I know, but you look sad too." She wasn't wrong. These events always did this to him, reminded him of everything he'd walked away from, everything he'd lost, everything he'd chosen to bury for the sake of keeping them both safe. The music alone was enough to split him open. Tonight they were cycling through the classics, each piece a ghost of the man he used to be. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Go on. I'll come get you in an hour." Mira studied him with the seriousness of someone much older, then nodded and disappeared back down the corridor. Damien watched her go, feeling the familiar ache in his chest, love and terror mixed together, the constant weight of single fatherhood pressing down on shoulders that had once carried nothing heavier than a baton. When he returned to the ballroom, the energy had shifted. People were turning toward the main staircase, conversations dropping to whispers, attention converging on a single point like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Damien followed their gazes and saw her. Sienna Lancaster descended the stairs like someone walking to her own execution. She was 30 years old and looked like she'd been carved from ice. Pale skin, dark hair pulled back severely, a silver gown that caught the light with every step. Beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, cold, untouchable, designed to be admired from a distance. But Damien saw what his daughter had seen, what the crowd couldn't or wouldn't see beneath the armor of wealth and power. She was terrified, Not of the stares or the attention, or even the weight of running a global corporation at an age when most people were still figuring out their careers. No, this was something deeper, something that lived in the tension of her shoulders and the careful blankness of her expression. Sienna Lancaster was afraid of being seen. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. A news crew repositioned for a better angle. Damien watched her reach the bottom of the stairs and immediately be swallowed by a circle of men in expensive suits. Board members, probably, or investors, the kind of people who smiled with their mouths and calculated with their eyes. She shook hands. She smiled. She said whatever words were expected of her. From 20 feet away, Damien could see her drowning. "You!" A sharp voice cut through his observation. The catering manager, a wiry woman named Gloria, who ran the serving staff like a military operation. "Stop standing there like a statue. Table 7 needs refills." Damien moved. Table 7 was in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by the kind of people who treated servers like furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. He worked mechanically, pouring wine, clearing plates, absorbing fragments of conversation that meant nothing to him. Her father would be rolling in his grave. Barely 30, and thinks she can rewrite 50 years of always been too ambitious for her own good. They were talking about Sienna Lancaster. They were always talking about Sienna Lancaster. In the 18 months Damien had been working these events, he'd heard her name more times than he could count, always delivered with the same mixture of admiration and resentment, respect, and barely concealed hope that she'd fail spectacularly. He understood that kind of pressure. He'd lived it once, in a different context, a different world. The weight of expectations. The impossibility of being human when everyone needed you to be perfect. "Champagne," Damien turned. A man in his 50s with silver hair and a smile like a knife was gesturing impatiently. Damien poured, keeping his expression neutral, as the man continued his conversation without acknowledgement. "The Lancaster girl is in over her head. Always has been. Thomas never should have left the company to her." "She's tripled the stock value in 4 years," someone else pointed out. "Luck? The market's been kind, but watch, one major scandal, one misstep, and the whole thing comes down. She doesn't have the stomach for what this business really requires." Damien moved away before he could hear more. It wasn't his business. None of this was his business. He was here to work, to earn money, to go home to his daughter and keep building the quiet, invisible life they'd constructed from the ruins of everything that came before. But he kept seeing that look on Sienna Lancaster's face, that careful, desperate control. The evening progressed. Dinner was served. Some kind of deconstructed salmon that probably cost $200 a plate. Speeches were made. Donations were announced to enthusiastic applause. The string quartet was replaced by a small orchestra, and the dancing began. Damien worked the perimeter, refilling glasses, clearing tables, watching the performance unfold. This was the part he hated most, the dancing. Because the music changed now, shifted from background ambiance to something more demanding, more emotional. Tchaikovsky, Brahms, pieces he'd once conducted, once lived inside, once believed would define his entire existence. He'd been 24 when he'd walked away from that world. Young, stupid, and so convinced he was making a choice that mattered. Instead, he'd just traded one kind of cage for another. "Excuse me." Damien looked up. Sienna Lancaster stood 3 feet away holding an empty champagne flute, her expression carefully neutral. Up close, she was different than she appeared from a distance. Smaller, somehow, despite the heels and the gown and the weight of her reputation. There were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide, and a tension in her jaw that spoke of headaches and sleepless nights. "Miss Lancaster?" Damien took the empty glass and replaced it with a full one. "Is there anything else you need?" She looked at him for a moment, really looked at him, not through him the way most people did, and something flickered across her face. Recognition? No. Something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or just exhaustion so profound that even a server's polite question registered as unusual. "No," she said finally. "Thank you." She turned to walk away and then stopped. "Have we met before?" Damien's chest tightened. "I don't think so, ma'am." "You look familiar. I have one of those faces." It wasn't entirely a lie. He'd changed enough in 8 years, shorter hair, weathered skin, the kind of tiredness that came from raising a child alone and working 3 jobs. that most people from his previous life wouldn't recognize him. He'd made sure of that. Sienna studied him for another moment, then nodded and moved back into the crowd. Damien watched her go, watched the way people parted for her, and then immediately closed ranks, talking about her the moment she passed, dissecting her choices, her appearance, her worth. Damien. Gloria appeared at his elbow. Break room, now. He followed her through the service doors, already running through possibilities. Had someone complained? Had he done something wrong? But when they reached the break room, Gloria just pointed at the corner where Mira sat cross-legged on the floor, still drawing. Your kid's been wandering. Keep her contained or take her home. I'm sorry, I don't care. Just handle it. Gloria was already gone, back to managing the controlled chaos of the event. Damien crouched beside his daughter. Mira, you have to stay here. I told you. I did stay here. But then I got bored, and I wanted to see the fancy dresses. And, baby, please, I need this job. Mira looked up at him, her expression serious. Are you sad because of the music? The question hit him harder than it should have. What? The music in there. It makes you look the way you look when you think I'm sleeping, but you're actually sitting in the dark in the living room. Christ, she saw everything. I'm fine, Damien lied. The music is just music. Then why did you stop playing? They'd had this conversation before, in different forms, at different times. Mira knew her father used to be a musician, a composer, though she wasn't entirely sure what that meant, and that something had happened to make him stop. She knew they'd moved around a lot when she was little, knew they didn't talk to anyone from before, knew there were subjects that made her father go quiet in a way that meant the conversation was over. That's complicated, sweetheart. You always say that, because it's always true. A crash echoed from the ballroom, something shattering, followed by a wave of noise that didn't sound like the usual hum of polite conversation. Damien stood quickly. Stay here. I mean it. He pushed back through the doors and into chaos. The crowd had gathered in a tight circle near the center of the ballroom, phones out, voices rising in that particular pitch that meant scandal was unfolding in real time. Damien couldn't see what was happening, but he could feel the energy shift from performative charity to genuine entertainment, the kind that would fuel gossip for months. He pushed through the crowd. At the center of the circle, Sienna Lancaster stood perfectly still, champagne dripping from her silver gown, her face frozen in an expression that might have been shock or might have been nothing at all. In front of her, a woman in red, younger, drunk, swaying slightly, was pointing and laughing. Thought you could just ignore me? Pretend you didn't destroy my father's company and walk away like, Victoria, please. Sienna's voice was steady, quiet, almost gentle. You're drunk. Let's talk about this somewhere private. Private? You want to handle this private? Victoria's laugh was sharp and bitter. You've spent 4 years handling everything private, making decisions behind closed doors, destroying people's lives, and smiling for the cameras like you're some kind of savior. Well, I'm done being quiet. Everyone should know what you really are. The crowd was eating it up. Phones recording, whispers spreading, the news crew repositioning for a better shot. Damien could see the board members standing off to the side, not intervening, just watching with expressions that ranged from concern to barely concealed satisfaction. They were going to let her burn. Sienna raised her chin slightly, and Damien saw something in her eyes that he recognized from his own mirror. The moment when you realize you're alone, truly alone, and that no one is coming to save you. Victoria. Her voice was still calm, still controlled. I understand you're angry. Your father and I had business disagreements, and I'm sorry that... Business disagreements? You gutted his company. You took everything he built and stripped it for parts. And when he couldn't take it anymore, when he... Victoria's voice broke. You don't get to call it a business disagreement. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the orchestra had stopped playing, musicians standing awkwardly with instruments half raised, unsure whether to continue or flee. Sienna said nothing. She just stood there, champagne dripping onto the marble floor, her expression unreadable. And Damien understood, in that moment, exactly what was happening. This wasn't just a drunk woman making a scene. This was an execution, calculated, timed, designed for maximum damage. The woman in red was a weapon, but someone else had aimed her. He looked at the board members again, saw the way they weren't surprised, saw the way they were already preparing their responses, their statements, their plans for what came next. They wanted this. They needed this. One major scandal, one misstep, and the whole thing comes down. Damien had spent 8 years invisible. 8 years keeping his head down, staying out of other people's business, protecting his daughter and the fragile life they'd built. 8 years running from the man he used to be and the world that came with him. But he looked at Sienna Lancaster standing alone in the center of that circle, and he saw someone drowning in front of a crowd that would rather watch than help. And something in him, something he'd thought was dead, buried, gone, refused to let it happen. He stepped forward. The movement was subtle at first, just a server crossing the floor with an empty tray. Nothing remarkable, nothing worth noticing. But Damien didn't stop at the edge of the circle. He walked straight through, past the cameras and the phones and the whispered commentary, until he was standing beside Sienna Lancaster. He set the tray down on a nearby table, turned to face the crowd. "I think it's time for everyone to give Miss Lancaster some space." The silence that followed was different than before. Shocked, confused, broken by someone's nervous laugh. Victoria stared at him. "Who the hell are you?" "Nobody important," Damien said quietly. "But you're drunk, you're upset, and you're being used. So maybe it's time to step back before you do something you can't take back." "Excuse me?" One of the board members, a man in his 60s with the kind of authority that came from decades of never being questioned, moved forward. "You need to return to your duties, immediately." Damien ignored him. He looked at Sienna instead. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. Shock, definitely, but something else underneath, something that looked almost like recognition, though that was impossible. "Miss Lancaster," Damien said, keeping his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Do you want to be here right now?" It was a simple question, but the way she looked at him, like he'd just asked something revolutionary, something no one had asked in years, made his chest ache. "No," she whispered. "Then let's go." He didn't wait for permission. He just turned, shrugged out of the server's jacket, and draped it over her shoulders, covering the champagne stain. Then he offered his arm, not as a server, not as someone beneath her station, but as one human being to another. Sienna hesitated for only a second before taking it. The crowd erupted as they walked toward the service corridor. Questions, accusations, cameras flashing, Gloria's voice cutting through the noise calling his name. But Damien didn't stop. He just kept walking, Sienna beside him, her hand on his arm, her head held high, even as her world collapsed behind them. They made it to the corridor before she broke. Not visibly. Sienna Lancaster was too practiced, too controlled, to fall apart where anyone could see. But Damien felt it in the way her fingers tightened on his arm, the way her breathing changed, shallow and quick, the way she stopped walking and pressed her back against the wall like she needed something solid to keep from dissolving completely. "I'm sorry," she said, and her voice was different now, younger, smaller, human. "I don't know why I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize. I just ruined your job." "Yeah, well," Damien managed something that might have been a smile. "It was a terrible job anyway." That startled a laugh out of her. Brief, slightly hysterical, but genuine. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and Damien felt something shift in the air between them. Something dangerous. "What's your name?" "Damien Vale." "Vale." She repeated it slowly, like she was testing it for truth. "That sounds familiar." "It's a common name." "No, it's not." Before he could respond, the service door flew open and Gloria appeared, her face red with fury. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Get back in there right now or you're fired." "I'm fired anyway," Damien said calmly. "So let's just skip the part where you pretend otherwise." Gloria opened her mouth to respond, but another voice cut through the corridor. "Daddy?" Damien's heart stopped. Mira stood in the doorway to the break room, holding her drawing, her eyes wide as she took in the scene, her father with a beautiful woman in a champagne-stained dress, the angry manager, the tension crackling like lightning through the narrow space. "Mira, go back inside." "But now." She disappeared, but Damien knew she was still listening. She always listened. Sienna was staring at him with a new expression, understanding maybe, or just surprise. "You have a daughter?" "Yes." "How old?" 7. And you're... She gestured vaguely, like she couldn't quite figure out how to phrase the question. A single father, yeah. Damien looked at Gloria. I need to get my daughter and go. Are we done here? You're fired, Gloria snapped. Obviously. Don't bother coming back for your last paycheck. You forfeited that when you decided to. Gloria. Sienna's voice cut through the tirade like a blade. Mr. Vale will receive his full pay, plus a severance bonus equivalent to 3 months' salary. I'll see to it personally. Gloria stared. Miss Lancaster, with all due respect, I don't need your respect. I need you to do what I just said, or I'll make sure every catering company in this city knows that you threatened to withhold wages from a single father in my presence. The silence that followed was absolute. Gloria's face went through several shades of red before settling on a furious white. Fine, she bit out. Whatever you say. She turned and stormed back into the ballroom, leaving Damien and Sienna alone in the corridor. You didn't have to do that, Damien said quietly. Yes, I did. You just threw away your job to help me. The least I can do is make sure you can feed your daughter while you find another one. She was still standing with her back against the wall, his jacket around her shoulders, looking simultaneously powerful and fragile in a way that made Damien's chest ache. Why did you do it? Sienna asked. Step in like that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Damien thought about how to answer that. He could tell her the truth, that he recognized the look in her eyes because he'd seen it in his own, that he understood what it meant to drown in public while everyone watched and no one helped, that sometimes you can only be invisible for so long before the isolation breaks you completely. But that would require explaining things he couldn't explain. Not here. Not now. Maybe not ever. You looked like you needed someone to give a damn, he said finally, and nobody else was stepping up. Sienna studied him for a long moment, and Damien had the uncomfortable feeling that she was seeing past every defense he'd built, every lie he'd told, every piece of himself he'd buried to become the invisible man raising his daughter in peace. I should go back in there, she said softly. Face the aftermath. Do damage control. Should, but do you want to? That question again. The one that seemed to cut through all the expectations and obligations and should-dos to something real underneath. No, Sienna admitted. I want to disappear. I want to walk out of this building and never come back. I want to... She stopped herself, shaking her head. Sorry, that's not professional. You're allowed to be unprofessional. You're human. Am I? Sometimes I'm not sure. The words were so quiet, so raw, that Damien felt something crack in his chest. He understood that feeling. The way you could spend so long performing, so long being what everyone needed you to be, that you forgot what it felt like to just exist. The service door opened again, and this time it was one of the board members, the man who'd tried to order Damien back to his duties. He looked at Sienna with an expression of barely concealed frustration. Sienna, we need to talk. The press is asking questions, Victoria's father's lawyer is here, and we need to coordinate our response before this gets worse. Worse than what? Sienna's voice was flat, emotionless. Worse than being publicly accused of driving a man to suicide in front of 300 witnesses? Victoria is unstable. Everyone knows that. We can spin this, but we need to move now, together, as a unified front. Damien watched Sienna's face close down, walls going up, armor sliding back into place, the woman disappearing behind the CEO again. It happened so fast, so smoothly, that he knew she'd done it 1,000 times before. 5 minutes, she said. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The board member looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Sienna's expression stopped him. He nodded tersely and disappeared back into the ballroom. Sienna took a breath, straightened her shoulders, handed Damien his jacket back. Thank you, she said formally, for your assistance tonight. I won't forget it. Sienna, Miss Lancaster. The correction was gentle but firm. The walls were up. The moment was over. Damien nodded slowly. He understood. He'd done the same thing countless times, locked everything dangerous behind professional distance, pretended the connection didn't exist, told himself it was safer that way. Sienna walked toward the ballroom doors, then paused with her hand on the handle. Vale, she said without turning around. That's a composer's name. There was a Damien Vale who conducted in Europe. 8 years ago, won some kind of prestigious award and then disappeared. Damien's blood went cold. I don't know what you're talking about, he said quietly. No, I suppose you wouldn't. Sienna opened the door. Light and noise spilled into the corridor. But whoever you are, Mr. Vale, whatever you're running from, thank you for stopping long enough to help me tonight. She disappeared into the ballroom, back straight, head high, every inch the untouchable CEO. Damien stood alone in the corridor, his heart pounding, his carefully constructed invisible life suddenly feeling very fragile. From the break room doorway, Mira's small voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. Daddy, are you in trouble? He turned to find his daughter watching him with eyes too knowing for 7 years old. No, baby. I'm fine. You're lying. You always touch your ear when you're lying. Damien dropped his hand, unaware he'd been doing exactly that. We should go home, he said. What about your job? I'll find another one. Because of the sad, fancy lady? Because, Damien stopped, trying to figure out how to explain what had just happened in terms a 7-year-old could understand. Because sometimes you have to choose between being safe and being decent. And tonight, I chose decent. Mira considered this seriously. Then she took his hand. I'm glad, she said. She looked really sad, like she needed somebody. Yeah, Damien said softly, gathering their things, preparing to walk away from yet another piece of the life they'd built. She did. They left through the service entrance, avoiding the main doors and the chaos still unfolding inside. The night air was cold, sharp with the promise of autumn, and Damien breathed it in deeply, trying to steady himself. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted tonight, something irreversible. For 8 years, he'd been invisible, safe, separate from the world that had destroyed him once before, and in the span of 10 minutes, he'd stepped directly into the spotlight, not as the man he used to be, but as himself, raw and imperfect and desperately trying to do one decent thing. Sienna Lancaster would remember him now. She'd already started asking questions, making connections, pulling at the threads of the identity he'd worked so hard to bury. Damien held Mira's hand tighter as they walked toward the bus stop, the city lights blurring around them. He'd saved Sienna Lancaster tonight, but he had no idea if he'd just destroyed himself in the process. The apartment was dark when they got home, the kind of dark that made even familiar spaces feel uncertain. Damien flipped the light switch and nothing happened. He tried again, then remembered. The electric bill. He'd paid it 3 days late last month, must have triggered some kind of automatic shutoff for missed deadlines. Stay here, he told Mira, fumbling for his phone to use as a flashlight. Is the power out? Just a mix-up. I'll fix it tomorrow. He found candles in the kitchen drawer, the emergency ones he'd bought after the last time this happened. The apartment came into focus in flickering yellow light, small, cramped, nothing like the places he'd lived before. One bedroom for Mira, a pull-out couch in the living room for him, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it was theirs, and it was paid for. And until tonight, he'd had a job that kept them fed. Mira changed into her pajamas without being asked, already understanding that tonight wasn't the time to push back on bedtime. She brushed her teeth using the flashlight on Damien's phone, then climbed into bed with her worn, stuffed rabbit. Daddy? Yeah, baby? Are we going to be okay? Damien sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her curls back from her forehead. We're always okay, but you lost your job. I'll get another one. What if you can't? The fear in her voice made his chest ache. Mira had been 3 when her mother died, too young to remember much, but old enough to absorb the instability that followed. The moving, the cheap apartments, the nights when Damien worked doubles and she stayed with whatever neighbor he could trust. She'd learned early that safety was conditional, that the ground beneath them could shift without warning. I always figure it out, he said softly. Haven't I? You always touch your ear when... I know. I'm not lying this time, I promise. Mira studied him in the candlelight, then nodded. The sad fancy lady was pretty. She was. Is she going to be your friend now? Damien thought about Sienna standing in that corridor, walls going up, distance returning. I don't think so, sweetheart. Why not? Because people like her don't have friends like me. That's stupid. Maybe. But that's how the world works. Mira yawned, fighting sleep. I think you should be friends anyway. She looked at you like you were important. She was just surprised, that's all. But Mira was already drifting off, her breathing evening out, her small body relaxing into the mattress. Damien watched her for a long moment, feeling the weight of every choice he'd made to get them here. The life he'd left behind, the name he'd buried, the music he'd abandoned. He went back to the living room and pulled out the couch bed, trying not to think about the fact that he'd just destroyed their financial stability for a woman he'd never see again. Trying not to think about the way Sienna had looked at him when she'd said his name. Vale. Like she was pulling at a thread that would unravel everything. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Vale? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. This is Amanda Cross, Miss Lancaster's personal assistant. Miss Lancaster would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss the severance arrangement we mentioned. Would the Lancaster Global offices work for you? Damien's mind went blank. What? 10 a.m. The reception will have your name. Is that acceptable? I can't just... He stopped, trying to organize his thoughts. Why does she want to meet? I'm not at liberty to discuss Miss Lancaster's reasons. Will you be there or not? The smart answer was no. The safe answer was no. Everything about this screamed danger. Walking into Sienna Lancaster's world, her territory, where she had all the power and all the information, and he had nothing but a name she was already suspicious of. I'll be there, he heard himself say. Excellent. Dress code is business casual. The meeting will be brief. Amanda hung up before he could respond. Damien stared at his phone, his heart racing. What the hell had he just agreed to? He didn't sleep that night, just lay on the pull-out couch watching candlelight flicker across the ceiling, trying to figure out what Sienna Lancaster wanted from him and why the thought of seeing her again made something twist painfully in his chest. At 6 a.m., he gave up on sleep and started getting ready. He didn't own anything business casual. Everything in his closet was either server uniforms or clothes worn thin from too many washes. Finally, he settled on dark jeans and the one button-down shirt he'd kept from before, wrinkled but clean. Mrs. Chen from across the hall agreed to watch Mira for a few hours. She was 70, half-deaf, and asked too many questions, but she loved Mira and didn't charge much. You have job interview? Mrs. Chen asked as Damien dropped Mira off. Something like that. You look nervous. Don't be nervous. You good man. They see that. Damien managed to smile and left before she could interrogate him further. The Lancaster Global building was downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of architecture designed to make you feel small. Damien stood across the street for 5 minutes, trying to convince himself to walk away. He could call Amanda Cross, tell her something came up, apologize, and disappear back into the anonymous safety of his invisible life. But then he thought about Sienna standing in that ballroom, drowning in front of everyone. He crossed the street. The lobby was exactly what he expected. Marble floors, expensive art, people in expensive suits moving with purpose. The receptionist looked at him like he'd tracked mud across her clean floor. Can I help you? Damien Vale, I have a meeting with Miss Lancaster at 10. She checked her computer, her expression shifting from dismissive to surprised. Oh, yes, Mr. Vale. Take the elevator to the 42nd floor. Someone will meet you there. The elevator was glass on 3 sides, giving him a panoramic view of the city as he rose. Damien kept his eyes on the floor numbers, counting up, trying to steady his breathing. 42 floors. He'd once performed for audiences in venues half this tall, commanded orchestras with a flick of his wrist, received standing ovations from people who paid hundreds to watch him work. But that was a different man, a different life. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area that made the lobby look modest. Amanda Cross was waiting, mid-30s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Mr. Vale? Thank you for coming. This way, please. She led him through a maze of corridors, past offices with glass walls, past conference rooms where people were already deep in morning meetings. Everything was clean, modern, expensive. Everyone looked like they belonged. Damien had never felt more out of place in his life. Amanda stopped at a closed door. Miss Lancaster is finishing a call. She'll be with you shortly. She knocked once, opened the door, and gestured for him to enter. Sienna's office was corner-facing, windows on 2 walls, the city spread out below like a map. The furniture was minimalist, a glass desk, 2 chairs, a small couch against one wall. Everything carefully chosen, carefully arranged, carefully controlled. Sienna stood with her back to the door, phone pressed to her ear, looking out over the city. She was wearing a dark suit, Her hair pulled back in the same severe style as last night, but something about her posture was different. Tired, tense. "I don't care what the board thinks," she said into the phone. "We're not releasing a statement that throws Victoria under the bus. She's grieving and she's angry, and she has every right to both." A pause. "No, absolutely not. Find another angle." She hung up and turned around. Her eyes met Damien's and something flickered across her face. Recognition. Maybe relief. He couldn't tell. "Mr. Vale, thank you for coming. You can call me Damien. And you can call me Sienna." She gestured to one of the chairs. "Please, sit." He sat. She remained standing, studying him with an intensity that made him want to fidget. "I'm going to be direct," Sienna said. "I pulled your employment records from the catering company. Damien Vale, age 32, single father, current address in the Riverside District. No permanent employment before 18 months ago. No credit history before 5 years ago. No social media presence. No digital footprint of any significance." Damien's chest tightened. "That's not illegal." "No, but it's unusual. Especially for someone who looks at a Brahms symphony the way you looked at that orchestra last night." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Sienna leaned against her desk, arms crossed. "I spent 3 hours last night digging through old music press." The Damien Vale who won the European Conductors Prize 8 years ago was 24, brilliant, from a prominent family. He disappeared right after the ceremony. No explanation, no forwarding information, just gone. "That's not me." "Isn't it?" They stared at each other across the office, the truth hanging between them like smoke. "Why does it matter?" Damien asked quietly. "What difference does it make who I was? Because I need to know who I'm dealing with. I need to know if the man who stepped in to help me last night is genuine, or if he's—" "If I'm what? Running some kind of con? Looking for leverage?" Damien stood up, anger flaring hot in his chest. "I threw away my job to help you because you looked like you were drowning, and nobody else gave a damn. That's it. That's the whole story. I don't want anything from you." "Then why are you here?" "Because you asked me to come." "You could have said no." "So could you. You could have let your assistant handle the severance payment. You didn't need to meet with me personally." Sienna's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, that he turned the question back on her. "No," she admitted. "I didn't need to." The silence stretched between them, taut and dangerous. "I want to hire you," Sienna said finally. Damien blinked. "What?" Not as a server, as—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I need someone who understands how to read a room, how to see what people are hiding, someone who isn't part of my world, who doesn't have skin in the game, who can tell me the truth without worrying about their position or their reputation or what the board thinks." "You want to hire me to do what exactly?" "To be honest with me, to stand beside me the way you did last night when everyone else was content to watch me burn." Sienna's voice was steady, but Damien could hear the exhaustion underneath. "Last night proved something I've suspected for a while. There are people in my own company working to undermine me. Victoria didn't just show up drunk and angry by accident. Someone made sure she was there. Someone fed her information, pointed her in my direction, gave her the courage to make a scene." "You think it was the board?" "I know it was the board, or at least members of it. They want me out. They've wanted me out since my father died and left me this company, instead of selling it to them like they expected." She moved to the window, looking out over the city. "I'm 30 years old, Damien. I've spent the last 4 years fighting to prove I deserve to be here, making every decision twice as carefully as any man would have to, working twice as hard for half the credit. And I'm tired. I'm so damn tired of fighting alone." Damien heard the raw honesty in her voice and felt something crack in his chest. He understood that exhaustion, the weight of constantly performing, constantly proving, constantly being judged. "I can't help you," he said quietly. "I don't know anything about running a company. I don't know your industry. I don't know corporate politics. I don't need you to know those things. I have a dozen advisors who know those things. What I need is someone who sees people clearly, who can walk into a room and tell me who's lying, who's loyal, who's waiting for me to fail." Sienna turned to face him. "You saw Victoria last night. You saw what no one else saw, that she was a weapon being aimed at me. You understood in seconds what my entire security team missed. That's not a skill. That's just empathy, understanding, The ability to see past what people present to who they really are? Sienna's smile was tired. That's exactly the skill I need, and I'm willing to pay for it. Damien shook his head. This is insane. You don't know me. For all you know, I could be exactly what you're worried about. Someone looking for leverage, someone... You have a 7-year-old daughter who you're raising alone while working 3 jobs. You walked away from a prestigious career rather than, what? Stay in a world that hurt you? And last night you threw away your only stable income to help a stranger. Sienna's eyes held his. I may not know your whole story, Damien, but I know enough. You're not here to hurt me. How can you be sure? Because people who want to hurt me don't usually interrupt their own lives to stop me from being humiliated in public. She had a point, but this still felt wrong, dangerous, like stepping back into the exact kind of world he'd spent 8 years running from. What exactly would this job entail? He asked carefully. Attend events with me, meetings, galas, anywhere I need a second pair of eyes who isn't compromised by corporate politics. Tell me what you see. Who's trustworthy? Who's not? Help me figure out who's trying to destroy me from the inside. That sounds like you want a bodyguard. I have bodyguards. I want someone who protects something other than my physical safety. Sienna pulled a folder from her desk and handed it to him. The salary is outlined here. It's more than generous, health insurance included, flexible schedule to accommodate your daughter, and if it doesn't work out, you walk away with 3 months severance. Damien opened the folder and his stomach dropped. The number on the contract was more than he'd made in the last 2 years combined. This is too much. No, it's exactly right. I'm asking you to step into a world where people will judge you, question you, possibly threaten you. I'm asking you to stand beside someone who's currently a target. That's worth paying for. Sienna, think about it. You don't have to decide right now. She glanced at her watch. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes, but if you want the job, it's yours. Just call Amanda by end of day. She was already moving toward the door, the conversation over, decision made. Damien stood there holding the folder, his mind spinning. Why me? He asked. Really, there have to be dozens of people more qualified. Sienna paused with her hand on the door handle. Because last night, when everyone in that ballroom was deciding whether to help me or enjoy the show, you were the only one who chose to give a damn. And I don't think that was an accident. She met his eyes. I think you know what it's like to drown in front of people who are supposed to care. And I think you decided you weren't going to let it happen to someone else. She left before he could respond. Damien stood alone in her office, the contract heavy in his hands, the city spread out below like a promise or a threat. He thought about Mira, about the electric bill he couldn't pay, about the fact that they were one emergency away from losing the apartment, one missed payment away from real trouble. He thought about the music he used to make, the life he used to live, the way stepping into that world again had destroyed him the first time. He thought about Sienna's eyes when she'd admitted she was tired of fighting alone. His phone buzzed. Text from Mrs. Chen. Mira asking when you come home. She worried. Damien took a breath, pulled out his phone, and called Amanda Cross. I'll take the job, he said, but I have conditions. I'm listening. My daughter comes first, always. If she needs me, I leave, no questions asked, and I need advance notice for any evening events so I can arrange childcare. Done. Anything else? Yeah, I want it in writing that if this goes south, you keep my name out of the press. I need to stay invisible. There was a pause on the other end. Miss Lancaster expected you'd ask for something like that. She's already agreed. Your identity will be protected. Then we have a deal. Excellent. Can you start tomorrow? Miss Lancaster has a meeting with potential investors at 2 p.m. She'd like you there. Damien closed his eyes. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to figure out how to explain this to Mira, to prepare himself to step back into a world he'd sworn he'd never touch again. I'll be there, he said. He took the elevator back down to the lobby, walked outside into the afternoon light, and just stood there for a minute, trying to process what he'd just agreed to. The city moved around him, people rushing to lunch meetings, construction noise echoing off buildings, the constant hum of traffic and ambition and money changing hands. This was a mistake. He knew it was a mistake. But he also knew he was going to do it anyway. His phone rang. Unknown number, but something made him answer. Damien Vale. The voice on the other end was smooth, cultured, and made his blood go cold. It's been a long time. Damien's grip on the phone tightened. Marcus, I heard you made quite the impression at the Lancaster Gala last night, stepping into the spotlight to defend the damsel in distress. Very heroic. Very unlike you. How did you find me? Please, you stepped into one of the most high-profile moments of the social season and put yourself on camera. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Did you think the family wouldn't notice? Marcus paused. We've left you alone for 8 years, little brother. Respected your wish to disappear. But that only works if you actually stay disappeared. What do you want? I want to warn you. Sienna Lancaster is in serious trouble. The scandal with Victoria Chen is just the beginning. There are people circling her company, dangerous people with long memories and deep pockets. And now you've associated yourself with her publicly. This isn't your business. It becomes my business when you start making decisions that could expose the family. You know what you took when you left. You know what people would do to get it back. Damien's jaw clenched. I don't have it anymore. Don't you? Marcus's voice was skeptical. Regardless, the fact remains. You're visible now. People will start asking questions, looking into your past, making connections. Is that really what you want for Mira's sake? The mention of his daughter made Damien's vision go red. You stay away from her. I have no interest in your daughter, but other people might. People who want leverage over Sienna Lancaster. People who would love to know that her new mysterious associate has a 7-year-old vulnerability. Marcus's voice softened, became almost kind. Walk away, Damien. Take whatever money she's offering and disappear again. It's what you're good at. Go to hell. I'm trying to help you. The world you're stepping back into, it hasn't changed. It's still cruel, still ruthless, still ready to destroy anyone who shows weakness. And you? You're all weakness now. A single father working service jobs, barely making rent. What do you think happens when they figure out who you really are? When they connect the dots between the brilliant young conductor who vanished and the waiter who swooped in to save Sienna Lancaster? I said I'm not interested in your help. Fine, but when it all falls apart, and it will fall apart, Damien, it always does, don't say I didn't warn you. Marcus hung up. Damien stood on the sidewalk, his hands shaking, his mind racing. How had Marcus found him so fast? Who else knew? And what the hell had he meant about people circling Sienna's company? He forced himself to move, to walk, to put distance between himself and the Lancaster building before he did something stupid like call Amanda Cross back and cancel everything. By the time he got back to Mrs. Chen's apartment, he'd almost convinced himself to run. To take whatever severance Sienna had offered, pack up Mira, and disappear to a different city where his brother couldn't find them and his past couldn't catch up. But then Mira saw him through the window, and her whole face lit up, and she ran to the door talking so fast he could barely understand her. Daddy, Mrs. Chen let me help make dumplings, and I made one that looks like a fish, and she said I'm really good at it, and can we make dumplings at home sometime? And also I drew you another picture. She showed him the drawing. It was him and Sienna standing together, surrounded by what looked like stars, or maybe just dots, her 7-year-old interpretation of something important. Who's that? Damien asked, pointing to Sienna's figure. The sad fancy lady. But she's not sad anymore because you're friends now. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, wiping flour from her hands. Your daughter very talented, very sweet. You raise her good. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Damien handed her the $20 he'd set aside for childcare, ignoring the way it left his wallet empty. The job interview go okay? Mrs. Chen asked. Yeah, I got it. Good, good. You deserve good things. Both of you deserve good things. Walking back to their apartment with Mira's hand in his, Damien tried to figure out how to explain what was happening. How to tell a 7-year-old that her father was about to step back into the world he'd spent her entire life running from. Daddy, you're doing the thing where you think too loud, Mira said. Sorry, baby. Is it about the sad fancy lady? Her name is Sienna, and yeah, kind of. Are you going to help her not be sad anymore? Damien looked down at his daughter, this fierce, perceptive, impossibly brave little girl who'd survived more loss and instability than any kid should have to face. And he thought about Sienna standing alone in that ballroom, drowning in front of hundreds of people who could help but chose not to. I'm going to try, he said. Good, because helping people is important, even when it's scary. When did you get so smart? I was always smart. You just forget sometimes. They climbed the stairs to their apartment. The power was still out, but Damien had paid the bill online during his walk, so it would be back on by morning. He lit candles again, made dinner from whatever was left in the fridge, pasta with butter, because that's all they had, and tried to figure out how to tell Mira that things were about to change. "I got a new job," he said over dinner. "It's different from the catering work. I'll be helping Sienna, with her company. Going to meetings, events, that kind of thing." "Will you have to wear fancy clothes?" "Sometimes, yeah." "Will you make more money?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. But Mira had learned early to worry about money, to understand that it mattered, that its absence had consequences. "Yes," he said, "a lot more." "Good. Then maybe we can get the power turned on without you looking all worried about it." Damien felt something twist in his chest. "I'm sorry, baby. I know it's been hard." "It's okay, Daddy. I know you're trying. I know you always try." She twirled pasta around her fork, thinking, "Is the job dangerous?" "No." "Why would you think that?" "Because you look scared. Like when we had to move that one time in the middle of the night and you said we were going on an adventure, but I could tell you were actually scared." She was 4 when that happened, when Marcus had found them the first time, when Damien had packed everything they owned into garbage bags and left in a taxi at 2 a.m. He'd thought she was too young to remember. "I'm not scared," he lied, "just nervous. It's been a long time since I had a real job like this." "Because you used to do music." "Yeah." "And something bad happened, so you stopped." "Something like that." Mira put her fork down and looked at him seriously. "Is the something bad going to happen again?" Damien wanted to lie, wanted to promise her that everything would be fine, that this was different, that he had it all under control. But Mira had always been able to see through his lies. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm going to try really hard to make sure it doesn't." "Okay." She picked her fork back up and went back to eating, apparently satisfied with that answer. After dinner, after Mira had brushed her teeth and climbed into bed, Damien sat in the living room with the contract Sienna had given him. He read through it carefully, the salary, the benefits, the terms, the protections. Everything she'd promised was there in writing. At the bottom, there was a clause he'd missed before, a non-disclosure agreement that went both ways. He couldn't talk about anything he learned while working for her, and she couldn't reveal his identity or background without his explicit consent. She'd protected him. Before he'd even asked, she'd built in safeguards to keep him invisible. Damien pulled out his phone and drafted an email to Amanda Cross, confirming his start date, asking about dress code and logistics. Then he sat there with his finger hovering over the send button, giving himself one last chance to back out. His phone buzzed with a new message from Sienna. "I know I'm asking a lot. I know this is a risk for you, but I meant what I said. I need someone who gives a damn, and I think you need to stop running. Maybe we can help each other." Damien stared at the message for a long time. Then he hit send on the email to Amanda and replied to Sienna with 3 words. "See you tomorrow." He lay down on the pull-out couch, exhausted but too wired to sleep. Tomorrow he'd walk back into the Lancaster building, not as a server, but as what? An advisor? An associate? He still wasn't sure what Sienna actually wanted from him, but he knew it was more than just reading rooms and identifying threats. She'd said it herself. She was tired of fighting alone. And so was he. Outside, the city hummed with its endless energy. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably already making plans, calling in favors, preparing for whatever chaos Damien's reappearance would cause. Somewhere out there, the people circling Sienna's company were planning their next move. But for tonight, in this small apartment with his daughter sleeping safely in the next room, Damien let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, he could do this. He could step back into that world without being destroyed by it. He could help Sienna without losing himself. He could be more than just the man who ran away. The candles burned down to nothing, plunging the apartment into darkness. But Damien didn't move to light more. He just lay there in the dark, listening to Mira's quiet breathing through the wall, and tried to prepare himself for whatever came next. Because one thing was certain, after tomorrow, there would be no more hiding, no more invisibility. No more pretending he was just an ordinary single father trying to survive. Tomorrow, Damien Vale would step back into the light, and this time, he wouldn't be alone. The next morning arrived too fast and not fast enough. Damien woke to sunlight streaming through the windows. The power had come back on overnight, and the sound of Mira singing something off-key in the kitchen. He found her sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal, still in her pajamas, her hair a riot of curls. "You're up early," he said. "I wanted to make sure you didn't forget breakfast before your first day." She pushed a piece of toast across the table toward him. "I made you this." The toast was burned on one side and barely toasted on the other, but Damien ate it anyway, his chest tight with love for this kid who worried about him more than any 7-year-old should have to. "Thanks, baby." "Are you nervous?" "A little." "You look a lot nervous." He did. He'd already changed shirts twice, trying to figure out what business casual meant when you only owned 3 shirts that weren't uniforms. He'd settled on dark pants and a gray button-down that was probably too casual but would have to do. "I'll be fine once I get there," he said, not entirely believing it. "What time will you be home?" "I'm not sure. But Mrs. Chen said she'd pick you up from school and you can stay with her until I get back." Mira nodded, scraping the bottom of her cereal bowl. "Will you tell me about it? About what it's like working with the sad, fancy lady?" "Her name is Sienna." "I know, but I like sad, fancy lady better." Despite everything, Damien smiled. "Yeah, I'll tell you about it." He dropped Mira at school, watched her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing, then caught the bus downtown. The morning commute was packed, people pressed together, everyone staring at their phones, nobody making eye contact. Damien stood near the back, gripping the overhead rail, trying to steady his breathing. "You can do this. It's just a job. Just meetings and events and reading people, which you've been doing your whole life anyway." But his hands were shaking when he got off the bus. The Lancaster building looked different in morning light, still imposing, still designed to intimidate, but somehow more real. Damien walked through the lobby, gave his name to the receptionist, and took the elevator up to the 42nd floor. Amanda Cross was waiting for him again, clipboard in hand, expression professionally neutral. "Mr. Vale, right on time. Miss Lancaster is expecting you." She handed him a badge on a lanyard. "Wear this at all times when you're in the building. It'll get you access to the executive floors, but nowhere else. Any questions?" "About 100. You'll figure it out as you go. This way." She led him through the same maze of corridors as yesterday, but this time she stopped at a different door. Smaller office, no windows, a desk with a computer and a phone. "This is yours," Amanda said. "Miss Lancaster thought you'd need a base of operations. The login credentials are on the desk. You'll have access to her calendar, company directory, and secure messaging. Don't share your password with anyone." Damien stepped into the office, feeling surreal. 24 hours ago, he'd been serving champagne. Now he had an office on the 42nd floor of a Fortune 500 company. "The investor meeting starts at 2, Amanda continued. "Miss Lancaster wants you there 15 minutes early to brief you on the attendees. Conference room C, 40th floor. Don't be late." "What am I supposed to do until then?" "Familiarize yourself with the company. Read the materials on your desk. Try not to look so terrified." Amanda's expression softened slightly. "You'll be fine, Mr. Vale. Miss Lancaster doesn't make bad calls about people." She left before he could respond. Damien sat at the desk, his desk, and stared at the stack of folders waiting for him. Company financials, board member bios. Recent press coverage. A timeline of the Victoria Chen incident with notes in the margins and handwriting he recognized as Sienna's. He spent the next 3 hours reading, trying to absorb everything, his mind spinning with names and numbers and corporate hierarchies he barely understood. But certain patterns started emerging. The board members who'd been pushing for Sienna's removal, the investors who'd been pulling funding, the whisper campaign that had been building for months, painting her as inexperienced, emotional, unstable. Someone was orchestrating this. Someone with access, with influence, with a stake in watching Sienna fail. The deeper Damien dug into the files, the clearer the picture became. 3 board members in particular kept appearing in the margins of Sienna's notes: Richard Moss, Patricia Helms, and David Keller. All 3 had been with the company since before Sienna's father died. All 3 had expected Thomas Lancaster to sell rather than pass the company to his daughter. All 3 had been quietly working to undermine her ever since. But there was something else. Financial records showing unusual consulting payments. Email chains that ended abruptly, like someone had deleted key messages. References to meetings that weren't on any official calendar. Damien pulled out his phone and texted Sienna. The files you left me, the redacted sections in the board communications. What was there? Her response came quickly. Legal told me to remove anything that could be used against us in discovery. Why? Because whatever you removed is probably the key to who's orchestrating this. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, meet me in my office. Now. Damien grabbed the files and headed down the hall. Sienna's office door was open, and she was standing by the windows again, arms crossed, looking out over the city like she was trying to find answers in the skyline. "Close the door," she said without turning around. He did. The click of the latch seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet office. "The redacted emails," Sienna said, still facing the window. "They were between my father and Robert Chen, from 3 years ago, right before my father got sick. Thomas Chen wanted to merge our companies. My father refused. Thomas got aggressive, threatened legal action, accused my father of corporate espionage. It got ugly. And then what happened? My father died. Heart attack, completely unexpected. I inherited the company. Thomas's business started failing 6 months later. I made an acquisition offer because we needed his assets and he needed a way out. He rejected it. 3 months after that, he killed himself." Sienna finally turned to face Damien. "Robert thinks I orchestrated all of it, that I somehow caused my father's death to inherit the company, then deliberately destroyed Thomas to absorb his business. That's insane, is it? From his perspective, I'm 30 years old and I walked into control of a billion-dollar company the same week my father died. Then his brother-in-law's company collapsed, and I swooped in to pick up the pieces. It looks suspicious as hell. But you didn't do anything wrong. I made business decisions that had consequences. That's all any of us do." Sienna moved to her desk, pulled out a folder from a locked drawer. "This is what legal made me redact. Emails between my father and Thomas showing that Thomas was already in financial trouble before my father died. Bank statements showing he'd been cooking his books for 2 years. Evidence that his suicide had nothing to do with me and everything to do with fraud he committed that was about to be exposed." Damien took the folder, skimmed through the documents. "This proves you didn't cause his death. It also proves that Thomas Chen was a criminal, which makes Victoria a criminal's daughter, which makes Robert a criminal's brother-in-law. You think they want this information public? No, which means they'll do anything to keep it buried." Exactly. "And if I use this evidence to defend myself, I destroy what's left of Thomas's reputation and probably push Victoria over an edge she's already teetering on. So I'm trapped. I can let them destroy me with lies, or I can destroy them with truth. Either way, people get hurt." Damien understood the impossible position she was in. He'd been there himself years ago, when staying meant watching everything he loved get corrupted and leaving meant abandoning people who depended on him. "There has to be a third option," he said. "If there is, I haven't found it." Before Damien could respond, Amanda knocked and entered without waiting for permission. "The investors are early. They're in conference room C waiting for you." Sienna's expression shifted instantly. Walls up, armor on, CEO face locked in place. "Tell them I'll be right there." Amanda left. Sienna took a breath, straightened her jacket, and looked at Damien. "Ready?" "No, but let's do it anyway." They walked to the conference room together. Damien could feel the tension radiating off Sienna, could see the way her hands clenched and unclenched as they approached the glass doors. The investors were already seated. Robert Chen sat at the head of the table like he owned it, his expensive suit and practiced smile radiating false warmth. Margaret Torres had taken a seat by the windows, her expression thoughtful and unreadable. James Way was standing, looking at his phone, projecting the kind of casual disinterest that meant he was paying attention to everything. Sienna made introductions. "This is Damien Vale, consulting with us on strategic initiatives. He'll be observing today." Robert's eyes flicked to Damien with barely disguised contempt. "Consulting on what, exactly? Are we bringing in servers now to advise on corporate strategy?" The room went silent. Damien felt his face flush but kept his expression neutral. "Mr. Vale brings a unique perspective," Sienna said, her voice ice cold, "which is exactly what this company needs right now. Do you have a problem with that, Robert?" "No problem at all. Just curious about your hiring decisions, given recent events." Margaret cleared her throat. "Can we begin?" I have another meeting at 3. Sienna moved to the head of the table, pulling up a presentation on the screen. She walked them through quarterly projections, market analysis, expansion plans. She was good, confident without being arrogant, direct without being defensive, answering questions with data rather than promises. But Damien watched the investors' faces and saw 3 completely different reactions. Robert wasn't listening, he was waiting. Every time Sienna paused, he'd jump in with a question designed to undermine rather than clarify. And you're confident these numbers are sustainable, given your lack of experience in market downturns? Or, I noticed the board wasn't consulted on this expansion. Is that typical of your leadership style? Each question was a small cut, designed to draw blood without being obvious enough to call out. Margaret was listening but conflicted. She asked real questions, pushed back on weak points, but there was something in her expression that looked like concern rather than hostility. She wanted Sienna to succeed, but wasn't sure she would. James was the most interesting. He barely spoke, just sat there with his fingers steepled, watching Sienna like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. When he did ask questions, they were sharp, cutting straight to the heart of whatever she was presenting. Your expansion into Asian markets assumes political stability that doesn't exist. What's your contingency? Or these diversity initiatives, are they actually changing company culture or just checking boxes for PR? But unlike Robert's questions, James's actually seemed designed to get real answers. An hour in, Robert made his move. Let's talk about Victoria, he said, his voice friendly in a way that made Damien's skin crawl. My niece, who you drove to a very public breakdown at your own gala. The room went silent. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. James leaned forward, interested now. Sienna's expression didn't change. Victoria is grieving. I'm deeply sorry for her loss and for any role my business decisions played in her father's distress. Distress. Robert's smile was cold. Interesting word choice. My brother-in-law is dead, Sienna. He killed himself because you gutted his company, destroyed everything he'd built, and left him with nothing. That's not what happened, isn't it? You saw an opportunity to absorb a competitor. You moved aggressively. You stripped assets. And when Thomas Chen couldn't take it anymore, when the pressure became too much, Robert stopped, letting the silence fill with implications. He made a choice that Victoria now has to live with, a choice driven by your ruthless ambition. Damien watched Sienna's hands clench beneath the table, the only visible sign that Robert's words were landing. Thomas Chen's company was failing long before Lancaster Global made an acquisition offer, Sienna said quietly. He'd made risky investments, over-leveraged his assets, and was 3 months from bankruptcy. We offered him a way out. He refused. And what happened after that? That was his choice, not mine. So you take no responsibility. I take responsibility for my business decisions. I don't take responsibility for someone else's mental health crisis. That's not fair, and you know it. Robert leaned back in his chair, studying her. You know what I think? I think you're exactly like your father, cold, calculating, willing to destroy anyone who gets in your way. My father, Sienna said, her voice shaking slightly, built this company from nothing. He created thousands of jobs, revolutionized an industry, and changed people's lives for the better. So if you want to compare me to him, Robert, go ahead. I'll take that as the compliment you didn't intend it to be. Your father also knew when to step back, when to let more experienced people make the hard calls. He understood his limitations. Robert's smile was poison. Do you? James cut in before Sienna could respond. What are we actually discussing here? Thomas Chen's death was a tragedy, but it was also 8 months ago. Are we investing based on business fundamentals or personal grievances? Robert turned to James, anger flashing across his face before he controlled it. I'm simply pointing out that our CEO has a pattern of making ruthless decisions without considering human cost. That's relevant to any investment decision. Every CEO makes ruthless decisions, James said. That's the job. The question is whether those decisions create value. And looking at Lancaster Global's performance under Sienna's leadership, revenue up 40%, stock price up 60%, market share expanding in 3 key demographics, I'd say the decisions are working, Margaret spoke up. But there's also the question of sustainability. Sienna, you've grown the company aggressively. Impressive numbers, absolutely. But aggressive growth often comes at a cost. Employee burnout, reputational damage, structural instability. How do you plan to address that moving forward? It was a fair question, asked without malice. Sienna took a breath and answered honestly. You're right. I've pushed hard because I had to prove I belonged here. Every decision I made twice as carefully as my father would have because I knew people were watching, waiting for me to fail. But I'm learning that sustainable leadership means more than just hitting targets. It means building a culture that can weather storms. It means making decisions I can live with, not just decisions that look good in quarterly reports. She looked directly at Margaret. I'm not my father. I'm never going to be my father. But I'm trying to build something that honors what he created while being honest about what needs to change. And that includes being honest about my own limitations. Margaret's expression softened. That's a good answer. More honest than I expected. Robert looked like he'd tasted something bitter. Pretty words. But actions matter more than words. And your actions have consequences, Sienna. Victoria isn't going to just disappear. There are legal implications, reputational risks. Is that a threat? Sienna's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. It's a reality check. You're facing a wrongful death lawsuit. Your board is calling for your resignation. Your investors, he gestured around the table, are reconsidering their positions. This company is in crisis, and it's your fault. Actually, James said, standing abruptly, I think we're done here. Sienna, thank you for your time and your honesty. I'll have my decision to you by end of week. He nodded to the room and walked toward the door. But before leaving, he stopped next to Damien. Consulting on strategic initiatives, James said quietly, a slight smile on his face. That's a diplomatic way of saying you're here to watch her back. Damien met his eyes. Something like that. Good. She needs it. James pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to Damien. Call me if things get worse. I might be able to help. He left before Damien could respond. Margaret gathered her materials more slowly. I appreciate your honesty today, she said to Sienna. Not many people in your position would admit to limitations or mistakes. That takes courage. She paused at the door. But courage alone won't save you if the board moves against you. You need allies. Real ones. Think about that. She left, giving Damien a curious look on her way out. Robert was the last to stand. He buttoned his suit jacket, took his time collecting his folders, making everyone wait. You know what I think? He said, looking at Sienna. I think you're in over your head. I think you've made enemies you don't understand and you're about to find out what that costs. He turned to Damien. And I think you should be very careful about who you associate with, Mr. Vale. Consulting can be a dangerous profession when you choose the wrong clients. The threat was barely veiled. Damien felt his jaw clench but said nothing. Robert smiled, that cold, practiced smile, and left. The silence that followed was absolute. Sienna stood perfectly still, her back to the windows, her expression unreadable. Well, she said finally, that went about as well as expected. He threatened you, openly. Robert's been threatening me for months. He's just getting bolder about it. Sienna started gathering papers from the table, her hands moving mechanically. The wrongful death lawsuit, the board pressure, the investor uncertainty. It's all coordinated. Robert's orchestrating it. I just can't prove it. What about the emails? The evidence that Thomas was cooking his books? Using that destroys Victoria. She's already fragile. I won't do that to her just to save myself. Even if it means losing everything? Sienna looked at him, and her eyes were exhausted. What kind of person would I be if I saved my company by destroying a grieving daughter's last memories of her father? Even if those memories are lies? Damien understood. It was the same impossible choice he'd faced 8 years ago, protect himself or protect the people who'd get caught in the crossfire. He'd chosen to walk away rather than fight, and he'd spent 8 years wondering if that made him a coward or just someone who understood that winning sometimes costs more than losing. There has to be another way, he said. If there is, I haven't found it. Before they could continue, Amanda appeared in the doorway, her expression tight. Miss Lancaster, we have a problem. Victoria Chen just filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the company. It hit the press 10 minutes ago. The color drained from Sienna's face. What? Amanda handed her a tablet showing a news article. The headline screamed in bold text, Lancaster Global CEO sued over executive's suicide. Sienna read in silence, her jaw clenched. Then she handed the tablet back to Amanda. Get legal on this immediately. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before end of day, and schedule an emergency board call for tomorrow morning. Already done. 9 a.m. They're calling for your resignation. Of course they are. Sienna's laugh was bitter. Anything else? Your mother called. 3 times. She's seen the news. Something flickered across Sienna's face. Pain, quickly buried. Tell her I'll call her back. She said it's urgent. It's always urgent with her. I'll call her back when I have time. Amanda hesitated, clearly wanting to push back, then nodded and left. Sienna sank into one of the conference room chairs, her perfect composure finally cracking. She pressed her fingers to her temples, breathing carefully, and Damien realized she was trying not to fall apart. He should probably leave. Give her space. Let her handle this in private the way she'd probably been handling everything in private for years. But he thought about her standing alone in that ballroom, drowning. He pulled out the chair next to her and sat. Talk to me, he said quietly. There's nothing to talk about. This is exactly what Robert wanted, a public lawsuit right after that disaster at the Gala. The board will use this as justification to force me out, the investors will pull funding, and Lancaster Global will be sold to the highest bidder within 6 months. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was narrating someone else's tragedy. I'm going to lose everything my father built, and there's nothing I can do to stop it. Yes, there is. What? What exactly do you suggest I do, Damien? Fight a wrongful death lawsuit while simultaneously trying to convince my board I'm competent? Prove I didn't drive a man to suicide while his daughter sobs for the cameras? Win over investors who are already halfway out the door? Yes, all of that. Sienna laughed, but there was no humor in it. You have a lot of faith for someone who just met me. I have faith in what I saw in that ballroom. You could have fired back at Victoria. You could have let your security team drag her out. You could have released those emails proving her father was a fraud. But you didn't. You tried to protect her. Even when she was destroying you, you tried to protect her. And look where that got me. It got you someone who gives a damn. Damien leaned forward. You hired me to tell you the truth, right? To see what other people miss? Yes. Then here's the truth. You're not going to lose this company because you're not fighting alone anymore. You have me, and I'm going to figure out who's orchestrating this whole thing, and we're going to stop them. Sienna stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. You've been working here for 4 hours. So? So you don't owe me anything. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. I'm choosing to. Damien held her gaze. Last night you told me you needed someone who gives a damn. Well, I give a damn, so let me help. For a long moment, Sienna didn't respond. She just looked at him with those exhausted, desperate eyes, trying to figure out if he was real or if this was just another performance she'd have to see through eventually. Why? She asked finally. Why do you care? Because I've been where you are, alone in a room full of people, drowning while everyone watches. And I know what it costs to survive that. I know what it takes. He paused. And I know that nobody should have to do it alone. Something in Sienna's expression cracked. Not broke, just cracked enough to let something through. Relief, maybe. Or hope. Or just the bone-deep exhaustion of someone who'd been holding everything together for too long. Okay, she said quietly. Help me. They spent the next 4 hours going through everything. Victoria's lawsuit, the specifics, the timeline, the legal strategy. The board members pushing for resignation, their motivations, their alliances, their vulnerabilities, the investors on the fence, what they needed to hear, what would push them one way or the other. The press coverage that was already spiraling, which outlets could be trusted, which were in Robert's pocket, which would print anything for clicks. Sienna walked Damien through the company's structure, the power dynamics, the alliances and grudges that had been building for years. She showed him financial records, email chains, meeting notes, everything she'd been keeping track of, trying to find patterns, trying to understand who was working against her and why. By the time they finished, it was almost 8. The office had emptied out, the hallways gone quiet except for the hum of after-hours cleaning crews. I should go, Damien said, checking his phone. Mrs. Chen had texted 3 times asking when he'd be home. My daughter. Of course, thank you, Damien, for today, for... Sienna stopped, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily to her. For staying. for not running when things got complicated. I told you, I give a damn. Most people say that. They don't mean it. I mean it. Sienna's expression softened slightly. I'm beginning to believe you do. Damien gathered his things and headed for the elevator. But something made him turn back. Sienna was still sitting in the conference room, surrounded by papers, the city lights reflecting in the glass behind her. Alone again, even though he'd just promised she wasn't. He pulled out his phone and sent her a text. Don't work all night. Tomorrow's going to be rough and you need sleep. Her response came almost immediately. Since when do you tell me what to do? Since you hired me to be honest with you. Go home, Sienna. There was a long pause. Then, fine, but only because you're annoyingly persistent. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't meant as one. I know. Go home anyway. Another pause. Then, thank you for today, for everything. I don't say that enough. You don't have to thank me. Just don't give up. I won't. Not yet. Damien pocketed his phone and headed home, his mind already spinning with plans for tomorrow's board meeting. Mira was waiting up when he got there, already in pajamas, sitting on the couch with Mrs. Chen watching some cooking show. Daddy, you're so late! I know, baby. I'm sorry. He paid Mrs. Chen double what they'd agreed on, knowing she'd been there for hours past what he'd planned. She protested, but he insisted, and eventually she left with promises to watch Mira again tomorrow. Damien locked the door and sank onto the couch next to his daughter. How was your day? Mira asked, curling into his side. Complicated. Was the sad fancy lady there? Yeah, she was there. Is she still sad? Damien thought about Sienna's face when the lawsuit news broke, the way her composure had cracked, the exhaustion in her voice when she'd asked him why he cared. Yeah, he said quietly. She's still sad, but we're working on it. Good, because everyone needs someone who helps when they're sad. Mira was quiet for a moment, then looked up at him. Daddy, are you in trouble? The question caught him off guard. Why would you think that? Because you have your worried face. The one you get when bills come, or when we have to move, or when something scary is happening that you don't want to tell me about. She was 7 years old and saw too much. I'm not in trouble, he said carefully. But the work I'm doing, it's complicated. And there are people who might not like that I'm helping Sienna, people who might try to make things difficult. Like when Uncle Marcus called? Damien's blood went cold. You heard that? I hear lots of things. You think I don't, but I do. Mira sat up, looking at him seriously. Uncle Marcus is bad, right? That's why we don't see him? He's not bad. He's just... Damien struggled for words. He's complicated, and he makes choices I don't agree with. So we stay away from him. To keep me safe. Yes. But now he knows where we are. It wasn't a question. Damien wondered how much Mira had pieced together over the years, how many conversations she'd overheard, how many worried looks she'd cataloged. Yes, he admitted. He knows where we are, but that doesn't mean he's going to do anything. And even if he does, I'm not going to let him hurt you. I promise. I'm not worried about me, Daddy. I'm worried about you. Mira hugged him tight. You always protect me. But who protects you? The question hit him harder than it should have, because the answer was nobody. For 8 years, Damien had been protecting Mira alone, making every decision alone, carrying every burden alone. Until now. I have Sienna, he said, surprising himself with how true it felt. We're protecting each other now. Mira pulled back, studying his face. Do you like her? What? The sad fancy lady, Sienna. Do you like her? Like, more than just helping her? It's not like that. It's just work. You're touching your ear again. Damien dropped his hand. It's complicated, baby. You always say that when something is actually simple, but you don't want to admit it. Mira yawned, fighting sleep. I think it's good. That you like her. You've been sad too, for a long time. Maybe you can help each other not be sad anymore. She said it like it was the simplest thing in the world, like two broken people could just decide to stop being broken together. Maybe, Damien said softly. Now come on, bedtime. He carried her to her room even though she insisted she could walk, tucked her in with her stuffed rabbit, and stood in her doorway for a long time just watching her breathe. His phone buzzed. Message from Sienna. I'm home. Happy? Damien smiled and typed back. Very. See you tomorrow. Tomorrow, when the board tries to destroy me. When we fight back, Damien corrected. There was a pause, then. We. I'm not used to that word. Get used to it. Another pause, then. Thank you, Damien, for everything today. I know I'm asking a lot. You're not asking anything I'm not willing to give. Why? Why are you willing to give so much for someone you barely know? Damien stared at the message, trying to figure out how to answer honestly without revealing too much. Finally, he typed, because I know what it's like to drown, and I know what it means when someone chooses to help instead of watch. You did that for yourself at the gala. You chose to survive instead of perform. Now I'm choosing to make sure you don't have to do it alone. The response took a long time to come. When it did, it was just 3 words. Don't disappear, Vale. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. He meant it. Despite Marcus's warning, despite the danger, despite every instinct screaming at him to run before this all fell apart. Damien Vale was done disappearing. Tomorrow, they'd face the board. Tomorrow, they'd start fighting back. Tomorrow, everything would get harder. But tonight, for the first time in 8 years, Damien didn't feel alone. And neither did Sienna. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m., which meant Damien was at the Lancaster building by 7:30, running on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. He'd left Mira with Mrs. Chen again, promising he'd be home for dinner this time, knowing it was probably another lie, but hoping it wasn't. The executive floor was already buzzing with nervous energy when he arrived. Assistants moved between offices with urgent expressions. Phones rang constantly, and through the glass walls, Damien could see lawyers huddled in conference rooms, preparing for war. Amanda found him in the hallway, looking lost. Miss Lancaster is in her office. She asked for you the moment you arrived. Amanda's usual professional mask had cracks in it this morning, worry lines around her eyes, tension in her jaw. It's bad, Mr. Vale. The board has the votes. They're going to force her out. We'll see about that. Amanda looked at him like she wanted to believe him but couldn't afford to. Good luck. Damien knocked on Sienna's office door. No answer. He opened it anyway. Sienna stood at the windows, still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair falling loose from its usual severe style. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. You stayed here all night, Damien said. Couldn't go home. Too much to do. She didn't turn around. Did you know my father used to stand here every morning before big meetings? He'd look out at the city and remind himself why he started this company. Not for money or power or legacy. For people. For the thousands of employees depending on him to make the right calls. Sienna, I can't see them anymore. The people. When I look out there, all I see is a battlefield. Enemies circling, knives waiting to find my back. Her voice was flat, exhausted beyond emotion. Maybe the board is right. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Damien crossed the room and stood beside her at the window. You want to know what I see when I look out there? What? A city full of people who have no idea that the woman running one of its biggest companies is about to give up without a fight. He turned to face her. That's not the Sienna I saw in that ballroom. That Sienna was scared and alone and drowning, but she didn't quit. She took my arm and walked out with her head up. That was different. How? Because I had you. I wasn't alone. Sienna finally looked at him, and her eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. In that boardroom, I will be alone. You can't help me. This is between me and them. Like hell it is. Damien pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. I spent last night making calls. People I used to know, back when I was someone else. I cashed in every favor I had left. And I found something. Sienna took the phone, reading the email on the screen. Her expression shifted from exhausted to alert in seconds. How did you get this? Doesn't matter. What matters is it proves Robert Chen has been coordinating with 3 of your board members for the past 6 months. Email chains, money transfers, meeting records, everything you need to prove they've been conspiring to oust you. But this also proves I've been under investigation, that someone's been digging into my board's communications without authorization. Sienna handed the phone back. I can't use this without admitting I've been spying on my own company. You weren't spying, I was. On your behalf. As a consultant. Damien met her eyes. Let me take the fall for this. I'll say I had suspicions, did my own digging, found the evidence. You can claim ignorance. Absolutely not. Sienna, I'm not throwing you under the bus to save myself. That's not who I am. Then who are you? Damien's frustration boiled over. Because the woman who hired me said she needed someone who'd fight for her. But every time I try to fight, you tie my hands. You won't use the evidence about Thomas Chen's fraud because it hurts Victoria. You won't use this evidence about board corruption because it makes you look bad. At some point, you have to decide, are you going to protect everyone else, or are you going to save yourself? The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. You don't understand, Sienna said quietly. Then explain it to me. My father built this company on integrity, on treating people fairly, on making ethical choices even when they cost him. When he died and left it to me, everyone said I'd destroy his legacy within a year, that I was too young, too inexperienced, too emotional. Her voice shook. If I use dirty tactics to survive, if I expose corruption by spying on my own board, if I destroy a dead man's reputation to defend myself, then they're right. I'm not worthy of this. I'm just another ruthless executive willing to burn everything to stay in power. Damien understood. It was the same impossible standard he'd faced in his own career. Be brilliant but humble, confident but not arrogant, ambitious but not threatening. Prove you deserve to be there by being twice as good while playing by rules that don't apply to anyone else. Your father's legacy isn't about being perfect, Damien said. It's about caring enough to fight for what matters. And right now, what matters is keeping this company out of Robert Chen's hands. Because if he wins, if the board forces you out, do you think he's going to run Lancaster Global with integrity? Do you think he gives a damn about your employees or your father's vision? No. Then stop protecting them. Stop protecting people who are actively trying to destroy you. Use the weapons you have. Sienna looked at the email on his phone again, her expression conflicted. If I go in there and expose this conspiracy, I'm declaring war. There's no coming back from that. You're already at war. You've been at war since your father died. The only difference is now you're finally fighting back. Before Sienna could respond, Amanda knocked and entered. It's time. The board is assembled. Sienna took a breath, straightened her jacket, pulled her hair back into its severe style. Watching her transform from vulnerable woman to untouchable CEO was like watching armor slide into place, piece by piece. Ready? Amanda asked. No. Sienna looked at Damien. But I'm doing it anyway. They walked to the boardroom together, Damien, Sienna, and Amanda, moving through the hallways like soldiers approaching a battlefield. Employees watched them pass with expressions ranging from pity to curiosity to something that might have been respect. The boardroom was on the 44th floor, all dark wood and leather chairs and floor-to-ceiling windows. 12 board members were already seated when they entered, Richard Moss at the head of the table, looking satisfied. Patricia Helms and David Keller flanking him, their expressions carefully neutral. Robert Chen sitting off to the side, not officially part of the board but present anyway, his smile poisonous. The rest of the board looked uncomfortable. Older men and women who'd served with Sienna's father, who'd watched her grow up, who'd voted to make her CEO and were now being asked to unmake that decision. Sienna took her seat at the opposite end of the table from Richard. Damien moved to stand against the wall, trying to be invisible. Just another consultant observing. Richard didn't waste time on pleasantries. Sienna, thank you for joining us. I know this is difficult, but we need to address the current crisis facing Lancaster Global. The lawsuit, the negative press, the investor uncertainty, all of it reflects poorly on the company's leadership. You mean it reflects poorly on me, Sienna said. Your words, not mine. But yes, the board has lost confidence in your ability to navigate this situation. We believe it's in the company's best interest if you step down voluntarily, immediately. The words landed like a bomb. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. One woman, Sarah Chen, no relation to Robert, looked like she wanted to object but didn't. And if I refuse? Sienna asked. Then we'll vote to remove you. We have the majority. Richard's smile was professional, practiced. This doesn't have to be adversarial, Sienna. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package. You'll walk away with your dignity intact. My dignity? Sienna's laugh was bitter. You're forcing me out of my father's company, and you're worried about my dignity? We're worried about the company. Your father would understand that. Don't you dare invoke my father. Sienna's voice was ice. He built this company. He trusted me to lead it. And you're throwing that away because a lawsuit makes you nervous? Patricia spoke up, her voice gentle. It's not just the lawsuit, dear, it's everything. The incident at the Gala, the board meetings where you've overruled our advice, the aggressive expansion plans we never approved. You're making decisions without consensus. That's not how your father ran things. My father ran things when the company was 1/10 this size, and the market was completely different. I'm adapting to reality. You're asking me to run a billion-dollar company like it's still 1995. David leaned forward. We're asking you to work with us instead of against us. And since you clearly can't do that, we're asking you to step aside for someone who can. Someone like who? Sienna looked around the table. Which one of you wants my job? Richard? You've been angling for it since my father died. Patricia? David? Or maybe we're just going to sell to the highest bidder and pretend it's about protecting my father's legacy? That's enough, Richard said sharply. We're not here to debate. We're here to vote. All in favor of requesting Sienna Lancaster's immediate resignation. Wait! Damien's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned to look at him. Richard's expression shifted from confident to irritated. Mr. Vale, you're here as an observer. Observers don't speak. I'm here as a consultant, and I have information relevant to this vote. Damien pulled out his phone, connected it to the room's display screen. Before you vote to remove Sienna, you should see this. The screen filled with emails, dozens of them, exchanged between Richard Moss, Patricia Helms, David Keller, and Robert Chen. Damien let the board read in silence, watching their expressions shift from confusion to understanding to anger. The emails were damning, coordinated plans to undermine Sienna's authority, strategies to turn investors against her, instructions to Robert on how to weaponize Victoria's grief, and most damning of all, discussions about how to divide Lancaster Global's assets once Sienna was forced out. Where did you get these? Richard's face had gone pale. That's not the relevant question, Damien said. The relevant question is why 3 members of this board have been conspiring with an outside party to destroy your CEO and profit from the company's collapse. This is illegal, Patricia said, her voice shaking. You can't just hack into private communications. I didn't hack anything. I made phone calls, asked questions, followed money trails. Everything on that screen came from public records and sources who were willing to talk. Damien looked at Sienna. Your consultant did his job. He found the truth. Robert stood abruptly. This is a setup. Sienna put him up to this. I did not, Sienna said, and her voice was steady now, strong. But I'm not going to apologize for it either. You've been trying to destroy me for months, Robert. You've used your niece's grief as a weapon. You've coordinated with my own board members to undermine me. And now you're going to sit there and act outraged that someone finally called you on it? You have no proof. The emails are proof. The money transfers are proof. The timeline is proof. Sienna stood facing the board. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. I've pushed too hard, moved too fast, made decisions without enough consensus. But I have never conspired to destroy this company for personal gain. Can the same be said for everyone in this room? The silence was absolute. Sarah Chen was the first to speak. Richard, is this true? Sarah, you don't understand the full context. Is it true? Did you coordinate with Robert Chen to force Sienna out so you could profit from selling the company? Richard's jaw clenched. We were exploring options. Contingency plans in case Sienna's leadership continued to damage. You were staging a coup, Sarah interrupted. Don't dress it up as anything else. Another board member spoke up, an older man named Thomas Wright, who'd been silent until now. I move that we table the vote on Sienna's resignation, pending a full investigation into these allegations. Second, Sarah said immediately. Richard looked around the table, realizing he'd lost control. We don't need an investigation. These emails are taken out of context. Oh, then you'll have no problem explaining the context to an independent investigator, Thomas said. All in favor of tabling the resignation vote? 7 hands went up, the majority. Richard's face went red. This is a mistake. Sienna is going to destroy this company. Funny, Sienna said quietly, because from where I'm standing, the only people trying to destroy Lancaster Global are sitting at this table, and they're not me. She turned to leave, then paused. I'm not asking for your trust. I know I haven't earned that yet, but I am asking for a chance to prove I deserve to be here. Not because I'm Thomas Lancaster's daughter, because I'm good at this job, because I care about this company and the people who depend on it, and because, unlike some people in this room, I'm not willing to sell it out for personal profit. She walked out. Damien followed. They made it halfway down the hall before Sienna's knees buckled. Damien caught her, held her up, felt her whole body shaking. I can't. She was hyperventilating, panic finally breaking through the armor she'd worn into that room. Conference room, now. Damien guided her into the nearest empty room, closed the door, made her sit. Sienna put her head between her knees, trying to breathe, failing. I destroyed them. I exposed them in front of everyone. There's no coming back from that. You defended yourself. There's a difference. Is there? Because I feel like I just proved them right, that I'm ruthless and willing to burn everything to survive. No, you proved you're not going to let them destroy you without a fight. Damien crouched in front of her, making her look at him. You did the right thing, Sienna. The hard thing, but the right thing. Then why do I feel like I just made everything worse? Before Damien could answer, his phone rang. Marcus. Again. He rejected the call. It rang again immediately. You should probably answer that, Sienna said, still trying to steady her breathing. It's not important. It's the third time he's called this week. It's important. She looked at him. Who is he? Damien hesitated, then answered honestly. My brother. You never mentioned you had a brother. We're not close. Clearly, Sienna's breathing was finally evening out. Why does he keep calling? Because he thinks I'm making a mistake, working for you, getting involved in… Damien gestured vaguely. All of this. Is he right? I don't know yet. The honesty of that answer seemed to surprise Sienna. Most people would lie. Say they're sure that everything's fine, that they have no doubts. I'm not most people. And you hired me, to be honest, remember? I remember. Sienna stood, still shaky but functional. I should get back out there. Do damage control. Talk to the board members who voted with me. Make sure they don't regret it. Take 10 minutes. Drink some water. Let your hands stop shaking. I don't have 10 minutes. The press is probably already… Damien's phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at the screen and his stomach dropped. The headline read, Lancaster Global Board in Chaos as CEO accuses members of conspiracy. Someone had leaked what happened in that boardroom, within minutes. Sienna read over his shoulder and went pale. No, this is exactly what I was trying to avoid. Amanda burst through the door without knocking. The lobby is full of reporters. Security is holding them back, but they're demanding a statement. What do you want me to tell them? Tell them… Sienna stopped, looking lost. I don't know. I don't know what to tell them. Tell them the truth, Damien said. The truth? The truth is my own board tried to force me out, and I exposed them using evidence my consultant obtained through questionable means. That's not a truth that helps me. Then spin it. Say you uncovered corruption within your own company, and you're committed to rooting it out. Say Lancaster Global was built on integrity, and you're not going to let anyone compromise that. Make this about fighting for your father's vision, not about survival. Sienna stared at him. You're good at this. I used to do publicity in my old life. Damien looked at Amanda. Give us 20 minutes to prepare a statement. Then schedule a press conference for this afternoon. You want her to face the press? Today? After that disaster in the boardroom? I want her to control the narrative before someone else does. If we wait, Robert and Richard will spin this their way. We need to get out in front of it. Amanda looked at Sienna. Your call. Sienna took a breath. Do it. Press conference at 2 p.m. Amanda left to make arrangements. Sienna sank back into her chair, exhausted. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly. Stand in front of cameras and lie about being in control when I'm barely holding it together. Then don't lie. Be honest. Show them the woman I saw in that ballroom, scared but brave, exhausted but fighting anyway. People relate to that more than they relate to perfection. The CEO of a Fortune 500 company can't afford to look weak. You're not weak. You're human. There's a difference. Sienna's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression shifted, something Damien couldn't read. Pain, maybe, or dread. "I have to take this," she said. "Your mother? How did you—" "Amanda mentioned she'd been calling, and you have the same look I get when my brother calls." Sienna almost smiled. "Families are complicated." "Yeah, they are." She answered the phone. "Hello, Mother." A pause. "Yes, I saw the news. Everyone saw the news." Another pause, longer this time. "I can't discuss this right now. I'm in the middle of—" She stopped, listening. Her expression went from tired to pained. "That's not fair. You can't—" More listening. "Fine. I'll call you tonight. I promise." She hung up, her hand shaking again. "You okay? My mother wants to meet. Tonight. To discuss my recent choices and their impact on the family reputation." Sienna's voice was flat. "Because apparently a wrongful death lawsuit and board coup aren't enough stress for one day. You don't have to go." "She's my mother. Of course I have to go." "No, you don't. You're 30 years old. You can set boundaries." Sienna looked at him like he'd suggested she grow wings and fly. "You don't know my mother." "Then tell me about her." "Why?" "Because you know everything about my life. That I have a daughter, that I'm a single father, that I walked away from a career I loved. But I don't know anything about yours except what I read in files. And if we're going to fight this war together, I should know what I'm fighting for." Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Then she started talking. "My mother is Eleanor Lancaster. Her family has money going back 5 generations. Old money, the kind that comes with expectations and rules and a very specific idea of what success looks like." Sienna's voice was careful, controlled. "When she married my father, her family disowned her. He was self-made, working class, too ambitious and not refined enough for their standards. But she loved him anyway, or thought she did." "What happened?" "He built Lancaster global, became successful beyond anyone's expectations, and suddenly my mother's family wanted back in, wanted to be associated with his success. My father, he was generous. He forgave them, let them back into our lives. And my mother, she never quite forgave him for making her choose in the first place." "That's not fair to him." "No, but my mother doesn't traffic in fair. She traffics in appearances and expectations and disappointment." Sienna's smile was bitter. "When my father died and left the company to me instead of selling it, she was furious. Said I was too young, too unprepared, that I'd destroy everything he built. She wanted me to decline the inheritance, let the board sell to investors, take the money and live a quiet, appropriate life." "But you didn't." "No, because this company was my father's dream, and I wasn't going to let it die just because my mother was scared I'd embarrass her." Sienna looked at Damien. "Every decision I've made, every risk I've taken, she's called it reckless. Told me I'm going to fail, that I'm proving her right, that I should have listened when I had the chance. And now, with the lawsuit and the board crisis, she's going to say I told you so. She's going to push me to resign, to walk away, to stop fighting." "Are you going to listen?" "I don't know. Maybe she's right. Maybe I am destroying everything. Or maybe," Damien said carefully, "she's scared. Scared that you're succeeding where she failed. That you chose your father's path over hers and it's working. And that terrifies her because it means all the safe choices she made, marrying back into her family's approval, living by their rules, putting appearances over passion. Maybe those choices cost her something too." Sienna stared at him. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "See people so clearly. Understand what they're not saying." "I told you, I just pay attention." "It's more than that. You see what people are hiding from themselves." Sienna's expression softened. "What are you hiding from yourself, Damien?" The question caught him off guard. "What?" "You read everyone so clearly, but what about you? What truth are you avoiding?" Damien felt his chest tighten. "We should work on your press conference statement." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you're getting right now." Sienna studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, but eventually you're going to have to let me see you as clearly as you see everyone else." They spent the next hour crafting a statement that was honest without being defensive, strong without being aggressive. Sienna would acknowledge the board crisis, commit to a full investigation, and reaffirm her dedication to Lancaster Global's founding principles. She'd take questions, but only a few, controlled and brief. By the time they finished, it was 1:30. The press conference was in 30 minutes. I should change, Sienna said, looking down at her wrinkled suit from yesterday. I can't face cameras looking like this. You look human. That's not a bad thing. Easy for you to say. You're not the one being photographed. Amanda appeared in the doorway. The press room is ready. 15 reporters, 3 camera crews. I screened the questions, but you know they're going to ask about Victoria, about the lawsuit, about whether you're fit to lead. I know. Sienna stood, straightened her jacket, pulled her shoulders back. Let's get this over with. They walked to the press room together. Damien could feel Sienna's tension radiating like heat, could see the way her hands trembled slightly before she clasped them together, hiding the weakness. At the door, she paused. What if I freeze? What if I can't do this? Then I'll step in. I'll end the conference, get you out of there, but you won't freeze. You're stronger than you think. You keep saying that, but you don't know. I do know. Because I've seen you survive things that would have broken other people. The gala, the board meeting, your mother's disapproval, you're still standing. That's not luck. That's strength. Sienna looked at him, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or understanding, or just the simple acknowledgement that they were both fighting battles nobody else could see. Okay, she said, let's do this. She walked into the press room and the cameras started flashing immediately. Damien stayed by the door, watching, ready to intervene if she needed him. But she didn't need him. Sienna stood at the podium and spoke with a clarity and honesty that Damien hadn't expected. She acknowledged the board crisis without apologizing for defending herself. She committed to transparency without revealing information that could be weaponized against her. She answered hostile questions with grace and direct questions with directness. She was brilliant. The conference lasted 20 minutes. When it ended, reporters were still shouting questions, but Amanda ushered Sienna out through a side door. They made it back to Sienna's office before either of them spoke. That was... Sienna stopped, looking stunned. I don't know what that was, but it didn't feel like a disaster. It wasn't. You were perfect. I wasn't perfect. I stumbled on the question about Victoria, and when that reporter asked if I'd resign, I hesitated too long before answering. You were human. People trust that more than they trust perfection. Sienna sank into her desk chair, exhaustion finally catching up. I have to meet my mother in 2 hours. I don't know how I'm going to survive that conversation. Want me to come with you? The offer surprised them both. Why would you do that? Sienna asked. Because you shouldn't have to face her alone, and because I'm apparently incapable of watching you drown in any context. Sienna's expression softened. You've already done so much today. You don't have to... I know I don't have to. I want to. Why? It was the same question she'd asked before. Why do you care? Why do you keep showing up? Why do you give a damn? And Damien realized he didn't have a good answer, or rather, he had an answer he wasn't ready to say out loud yet. Because we're a team, he said finally, and teams don't let each other face the hard stuff alone. Sienna stood, crossed the office, and did something that surprised him. She hugged him. It was brief, awkward, like she wasn't sure how hugs worked, but it was genuine. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for staying, for fighting, for... She pulled back, her eyes wet. For giving a damn. Always. They stood there for a moment, the city lights reflecting in the windows behind them, the chaos of the day finally settling into something quieter. Then Damien's phone rang. Marcus again. This time he answered. What do you want? I want to meet. Tonight. I have information you need. I'm not interested in your information. It's about Sienna Lancaster, about why Robert Chen is really targeting her. And trust me, little brother, you want to hear this. Marcus paused. Meet me. Or don't. But when everything falls apart, don't say I didn't try to warn you. He hung up before Damien could respond. Sienna was watching him. Your brother? Yeah. What did he want? Damien thought about lying, about keeping her separate from the complications of his old life. But she'd asked him to be honest, to stop hiding. He wants to meet, says he has information about why Robert is targeting you. Do you trust him? No. But you're thinking about going anyway. Yeah. Then I'm coming with you. Sienna, we're a team, remember? Teams don't let each other face the hard stuff alone. She threw his own words back at him with a slight smile. Besides, I want to meet the brother who keeps calling with ominous warnings. This is a bad idea. Probably. But we're doing it anyway. And Damien realized he didn't have the energy to argue. Not after the day they'd had. Not after everything they'd survived together. Fine. But we meet my mother first, then we deal with Marcus. Deal. They left the office together as the sun began to set over the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked almost like fire. And Damien couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into flames. But at least they weren't walking alone. Eleanor Lancaster lived in a penthouse that looked like a museum, all white marble and crystal chandeliers and furniture too expensive to actually sit on. Damien stood in the entryway beside Sienna, feeling like he'd tracked dirt across a sacred space just by existing. A woman in her late 50s emerged from the living room, perfectly coiffed silver hair, a dress that probably cost more than Damien's entire wardrobe, and an expression that could freeze fire. She looked at Sienna with the kind of disappointment that had been cultivated over decades. "You're late," Eleanor said. "I had a press conference, the one about the board crisis. You might have seen it on the news." "I did. It was embarrassing." Eleanor's eyes shifted to Damien. "And you brought a stranger to a family discussion. How typical." "Mother, this is Damien Vale. He's consulting for the company. Damien, my mother, Eleanor Lancaster." Damien extended his hand. Eleanor looked at it like he'd offered her a dead fish. "Consulting? How vague." She turned and walked into the living room, clearly expecting them to follow. "I assume this consultant is responsible for the disaster that unfolded today? Encouraging you to expose your own board members? Making the company look unstable?" Sienna's jaw clenched, but she kept her voice level. "Damien helped me uncover corruption. That's his job." "His job is to make you look worse than you already did?" Eleanor settled into a chair, gesturing for them to sit on the couch across from her. "Sienna, darling, I've tried to be patient. I've tried to let you learn from your mistakes. But today's spectacle, this is beyond acceptable. Robert Chen and 3 board members were conspiring to force me out so they could sell the company. What was I supposed to do? Let them. You were supposed to handle it quietly, professionally, not air the company's dirty laundry in front of the entire board and then hold a press conference to make sure the whole world knew about it." Eleanor's voice was cold, controlled. "Your father would be ashamed." The words landed like a slap. Sienna flinched, and Damien felt anger flare hot in his chest. "That's not fair," he said. Eleanor's eyes snapped to him. "I'm sorry, who are you to comment on what's fair in this family? I'm someone who was there today, who watched Sienna defend herself against people trying to destroy her. And I'm pretty sure her father would be proud that she fought back instead of rolling over. You don't know anything about Thomas Lancaster. Maybe not. But I know something about watching someone drown while people who are supposed to care stand by and do nothing. And that's what you're doing right now." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Eleanor's expression shifted from dismissive to genuinely angry. "How dare you? Mother, stop." Sienna's voice was quiet but firm. "Damien is right. You've been telling me to give up since the moment I inherited this company. You wanted me to sell, to walk away, to live the life you think I should live. But that's not who I am, and I'm done apologizing for it. You're making a mistake, multiple mistakes. That lawsuit will be handled by lawyers, by me, by the team I'm building." Sienna stood up. "I came here because you asked me to, because you're my mother and I wanted to respect that. But I'm not going to sit here and let you tell me I'm failing when I'm fighting harder than I've ever fought for anything. Fighting doesn't mean you're winning, Sienna. It just means you're too stubborn to see when you're beaten. No, fighting means I haven't given up, and the only person trying to beat me right now is you." Eleanor's face went pale. "That's not... I'm trying to protect you. From what? From succeeding? From proving you wrong?" Sienna's voice cracked. "I know you wanted me to decline the inheritance. I know you think I'm not capable, but I am capable. I've grown this company. I've fought off hostile takeovers. I've survived a board coup. And I did it all while you stood on the sidelines telling me I was going to fail. Because I don't want to watch you destroy yourself." Eleanor's composure finally broke. "Your father gave everything to that company. It consumed him, controlled him, took every hour of every day until there was nothing left for us. For me. And when he died, he left me with nothing but memories of a man I barely knew anymore. I don't want that for you. I don't want you to wake up at 40 and realize you sacrificed your whole life for a company that will replace you the moment you're gone. The raw honesty in Eleanor's voice shifted something in the room. Sienna sank back onto the couch, her anger deflating into something sadder. Is that what you really think happened? Sienna asked quietly. That the company took him from you? I know it did. I watched it happen. Year by year, decision by decision, until the man I married was gone and there was just the CEO left. Eleanor's hands were shaking. When he died, part of me was relieved, because at least the fight was over. At least I didn't have to compete with Lancaster Global for his attention anymore. Mother, and then he left it to you. Not to the board, not to investors, but to you. And I saw the same hunger in your eyes that I'd seen in his, that need to prove yourself, to build something, to matter. And I knew you were going to make the same choices he did, and I'd lose you too. Damien watched Sienna's face as she processed her mother's words, saw the understanding dawn, the pain and recognition mixing together. You're not losing me, Sienna said. I'm right here. Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, I see a woman who works 18-hour days, who hasn't taken a vacation in 4 years, who doesn't have friends or hobbies or anything resembling a life outside that office. Just like your father. Just like the man who died at 58 from a heart attack brought on by stress and overwork. Eleanor's voice broke. I don't want that for you, Sienna. I want you to live, to be happy, to have something more than just work. The words hung in the air between them, years of unspoken fear finally voiced. I understand, Sienna said finally. I understand you're scared, but asking me to walk away from the company, that's not protecting me. That's asking me to give up the one thing that makes me feel like I matter. Like I'm more than just Thomas Lancaster's daughter or Eleanor Lancaster's disappointing child. You're not disappointing. Yes, I am. I've always been disappointing to you because I chose his path instead of yours, because I'm not refined or appropriate or willing to live quietly. Sienna's voice was steady now, clear. But I'm done apologizing for that. I'm done trying to be who you want me to be. I'm going to run this company. I'm going to fight for it. And I'm going to do it my way, even if that scares you. Eleanor looked at her daughter for a long moment, something complicated passing across her face. Then she turned to Damien. And you? What's your role in all this? Beyond consultant? Damien met her eyes. I'm her friend. I'm someone who gives a damn whether she survives this. Why? Because nobody should have to fight alone, and because she's worth fighting for. Eleanor studied him with an intensity that made Damien want to squirm. You care about her, actually care about her, not just her money or her position. Yes. That's either very foolish or very brave. I haven't decided which. Eleanor stood, smoothing her dress. Sienna, I can't support what you're doing. I still think you're making a mistake, but I can see you're not going to listen to me. You never have. That's not fair. It's completely fair. You're stubborn, just like your father. Once you've decided something, nothing I say will change your mind. Eleanor moved to the window, looking out over the city. But for what it's worth, the press conference today, you handled it well, better than I expected. You were honest without being weak. That takes skill. It was the closest thing to a compliment Sienna had probably gotten from her mother in years. Damien watched Sienna's expression shift from defensive to surprise to something that looked almost like hope. Thank you, Sienna said quietly. Don't thank me. I still think you're in over your head, but... Eleanor paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily to her. But maybe that's because I've never seen you succeed at something this big. Maybe I've been waiting for you to fail because it's easier than watching you prove me wrong. Mother, just be careful. Please. Don't sacrifice everything for that company the way your father did. Don't forget that there's more to life than quarterly reports and board meetings. Eleanor's voice softened. And if you must fight this battle, at least fight it with people who actually care about you, not just hired consultants. She looked pointedly at Damien when she said it, and he understood the message. Don't hurt my daughter. Don't use her. Don't be another person who takes and takes until there's nothing left. I won't, he said, even though Eleanor hadn't asked the question out loud. They left shortly after, stepping out into the evening air that felt lighter than the atmosphere in Eleanor's penthouse. I'm sorry about that, Sienna said as they waited for the car. My mother is scared and trying to protect you the only way she knows how, which is by telling me I'm going to fail, which is by trying to save you from the life that killed your father. Damien looked at her. She's not wrong to worry. You do work too much. You don't have friends or hobbies. You've sacrificed everything for that company. Are you taking her side now? I'm being honest. That's my job, remember? Damien's voice was gentle. You can run Lancaster Global and have a life. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. But you have to want both, and right now you only seem to want one. Sienna was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to want both. Work is safe. Work makes sense. Work I can control. And life? Life is messy. Life is people who disappoint you or leave you or die on you. Work doesn't do that. Damien understood. He'd made similar choices after his wife died, after his world fell apart. He'd thrown himself into being Mira's father because that was concrete, manageable, something he could do right even when everything else was wrong. Life is messy, he agreed, but it's also the only thing worth having. Work is just work. It ends. Companies get sold or go bankrupt or move on. But the connections you make, the people you care about, that's what lasts. The car arrived. They got in, and Damien gave the driver the address Marcus had texted him, some restaurant downtown, neutral territory. Are you nervous? Sienna asked. About seeing your brother? Terrified. Good. At least I'm not the only one facing family trauma tonight. Despite everything, Damien smiled. The restaurant was the kind of place where power brokers made deals over expensive wine and steak. Marcus was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking exactly like Damien remembered. Polished, confident, dangerous in a way that came from never having been told no. He stood when they approached, and Damien saw the exact moment Marcus recognized who was with him. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly masked. Little brother and Sienna Lancaster, this is unexpected. We're a package deal, Damien said. Whatever you have to say, you say in front of both of us. Marcus gestured for them to sit. I respect the solidarity, but what I have to tell you is family business, Damien. Are you sure you want her to hear it? Yes. Fine. Don't say I didn't warn you. Marcus pulled a folder from the briefcase beside him and slid it across the table. Robert Chen isn't targeting you because of his brother-in-law's death, Sienna. He's targeting you because your father destroyed his family 25 years ago, and he's been waiting for the chance to return the favor ever since. Sienna opened the folder. Damien read over her shoulder. Inside were documents, old ones, yellowed with age, business records from the early days of Lancaster Global. And at the center of it all, a partnership agreement between Thomas Lancaster and Robert Chen's father, David Chen. Thomas and David founded Lancaster Global together, Marcus explained. Equal partners, best friends. They built it from nothing, worked 16-hour days, sacrificed everything. And then, when the company started succeeding, Thomas bought David out, forced him to sell his shares at a fraction of what they'd eventually be worth. That's not... My father wouldn't... Sienna's voice shook. Read the documents? It's all there. David Chen was forced out of his own company by his best friend. He spent the rest of his life trying to rebuild, but he never recovered. He died angry and bitter, having lost everything. And Robert watched it happen, watched his father get destroyed by a man who claimed to be family. Damien felt sick. Why are you telling us this? Because Robert isn't going to stop until he's destroyed everything Thomas built. He doesn't care about money or power. He cares about revenge. And Sienna, you're just collateral damage in a war that started before you were born. Sienna was pale, her hands shaking as she read through the documents. If this is true, if my father really did this, then everything I've been fighting for is built on a lie. Not a lie, Marcus said, just an uncomfortable truth. Your father made ruthless decisions to build his empire. He wasn't the saint everyone remembers. He was a businessman who did what he had to do to survive. And you're telling me this why? Sienna looked at Marcus with red-rimmed eyes. Out of the goodness of your heart? I'm telling you because my brother is involved now. And I don't want to watch him get destroyed when Robert's revenge inevitably catches up with everyone associated with Lancaster Global. Marcus looked at Damien. Walk away. Both of you. The company is doomed. Robert has too much ammunition, too much anger, too much support from people who were also hurt by Thomas Lancaster's rise. You can't win this fight. Yes, we can, Damien said. You're being naive. Maybe. But we're not running. Damien took Sienna's hand under the table, felt her fingers grip his like a lifeline. Whatever Thomas did 25 years ago, that's on him, not on Sienna. She's built her own legacy, made her own choices, and she's not responsible for her father's sins. The world doesn't work that way. Children pay for their parents' mistakes all the time. Then the world is wrong. Damien stood, pulling Sienna up with him. Thanks for the information, but we're not interested in your advice. Damien, I spent 8 years running Marcus. 8 years hiding from everything I used to be because I thought survival meant staying invisible. But I was wrong. Survival means fighting for what matters. And Sienna matters. Lancaster Global matters. What we're building together, that matters too. Marcus looked at his brother for a long moment, something complicated passing across his face. You've changed. Yeah, I have. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I. They left before Marcus could say anything else. In the car, Sienna was silent, staring at the documents in her lap like they might rearrange themselves into something less devastating. What are you thinking? Damien asked. I'm thinking my whole life might be built on a foundation of lies. I'm thinking my father, the man I've been trying to honor, to live up to, might have been exactly what Robert always said. Ruthless, willing to destroy anyone to get what he wanted. Or maybe he was complicated. Maybe he made hard choices that hurt people. Maybe he did something terrible and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for it by building something good. Damien took her hand again. People aren't just one thing, Sienna. They're not just heroes or villains. They're both. Your father was both. Then what does that make me? If I'm fighting to save a company he built on someone else's betrayal? It makes you someone who's choosing to build something different, something better. You're not your father. You don't have to make his mistakes. Sienna looked at him, tears streaming down her face. How are you so sure? Because I've watched you. I've seen the choices you make. You protected Victoria even when exposing her father would have saved you. You tried to handle the board quietly even when they were actively destroying you. You care about people, Sienna. Actually care. That's not something your father was known for. I feel like I don't know anything anymore. About him. About the company. About what I'm even fighting for. Then figure it out. Take the time you need. But don't give up just because the fight got complicated. They drove in silence for a while. Then Sienna said, I want to talk to Robert. Tomorrow. Alone. I want to hear his side of the story. That's a bad idea. Probably, but I need to know the truth, all of it, not just what's in these documents. She looked at Damien. Will you come with me? I thought you said alone. I meant without lawyers or PR people or anyone from the company. Just, she struggled for words. Just you. Because you see people clearly. And I need someone who can tell me if Robert is lying or if everything I believed is falling apart. Damien wanted to say no, wanted to protect her from whatever painful truth Robert would deliver, but he'd promised to be honest, to help her see clearly, to stand beside her even when it was hard. Okay, he said, we'll go together. They met Robert the next morning in a coffee shop far from Lancaster Global, far from anywhere they might be recognized. He looked surprised when Sienna walked in with Damien, but he didn't object. Sienna, I wasn't expecting you to reach out. I read the documents, about my father and yours, about the partnership. Sienna's voice was steady, but Damien could see her hands shaking. I want to hear your version. What really happened? Robert studied her for a long moment. Then he started talking. My father and Thomas were like brothers. They built Lancaster Global from nothing, scraping together money, working out of a garage, dreaming about changing the world. And for a while, it worked. They were equal partners, equal voices, equal dreams. Robert's voice was bitter, but Thomas was always more ambitious, more willing to take risks. And when those risks started paying off, when the company started growing, he didn't want to share control anymore. He wanted it all. So he bought your father out. He forced him out, gave him an ultimatum, Sell his shares or watch Thomas burn the company to the ground and rebuild it without him. My father had a family to support, bills to pay. He couldn't afford to gamble on Thomas's bluff, so he sold, for a fraction of what those shares would eventually be worth. I'm sorry, Sienna said quietly. That must have been devastating. It destroyed him. He tried to start other businesses, but nothing worked. He died angry and broke, having lost everything because he trusted the wrong man. Robert's eyes were hard. So yes, when Thomas died and left you that company, when you started running it like it was yours by right instead of built on my father's stolen dreams, I wanted revenge. I wanted you to feel what my father felt, to lose everything because someone more powerful decided you didn't deserve it. And the lawsuit? Victoria? Victoria's grief is real. Her father did kill himself because of business pressure. But yes, I encouraged her to file suit. I helped her see that you were responsible. I wanted to destroy you the way your father destroyed mine. The honesty was brutal. But Damien could see something in Robert's face that looked almost like relief. Like he'd been carrying this rage for so long that finally speaking it out loud was its own kind of freedom. What do you want? Sienna asked. Revenge? Money? The company? Robert was quiet for a long time. I wanted you to suffer. But watching you these past few weeks, watching you fight, watching you refuse to give up even when everything was falling apart, you remind me of my father, the way he was before Thomas broke him, that hunger to build something that matters, that refusal to quit. So what now? Now I don't know. Because destroying you doesn't bring my father back. It doesn't undo what Thomas did. It just creates more pain, more loss, more people carrying anger they'll pass down to the next generation. Robert looked exhausted. I'm tired, Sienna. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of using my niece's grief as a weapon. I'm tired of fighting a war that started before either of us was born. Then stop fighting, Damien said. Both of you. Robert looked at him. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You want Lancaster Global to pay for what Thomas did? Fine. Make them pay by being better than he was. Help Sienna build a company that doesn't destroy people, that honors the partnership your father and Thomas should have had. You want me to help her? After everything? I want you to stop repeating the same cycle of revenge that's been poisoning both your families for 25 years. Damien looked at Sienna, then back at Robert. Your fathers made mistakes. They hurt each other, but you don't have to keep making the same mistakes. You can choose something different. The silence that followed was heavy with years of unspoken pain. I don't know if I can, Robert said finally. Let go of the anger. Forgive what Thomas did. You don't have to forgive him, Sienna said. But maybe you can forgive me. I didn't know what my father did to yours. I didn't know the company was built on someone else's stolen dream, but I know now, and I want to make it right. How? Sienna took a breath. Rename the company. Lancaster Chen Global. Put your father's name back where it belongs. Make the partnership official again, the way it should have been from the start. Robert stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You can't be serious. I am. The board will fight it. The shareholders will push back. But I don't care. Your father deserves to be recognized for what he built. And if changing the name is what it takes to make that right, then that's what I'll do. That's insane. You'd give up your father's legacy just like that? It was never just his legacy. It was your father's too. I'm just acknowledging the truth. Robert's eyes were wet. Why would you do this? Because I'm tired too. Tired of fighting. Tired of carrying my father's sins. Tired of watching people get hurt because of choices made before I was born. Sienna's voice broke. I don't know if this fixes anything, but maybe it's a start. They sat in silence for a long time. Then Robert extended his hand across the table. I'll withdraw the lawsuit. Victoria won't like it, but I'll handle her. And I'll talk to the board members I've been working with. Tell them the fight is over. Sienna took his hand. Thank you. Don't thank me. I spent months trying to destroy you. I used my niece's pain as a weapon. I'm not a good person, Sienna. None of us are. We're just people trying to do better than we did yesterday. After Robert left, Sienna and Damien sat in the coffee shop for another hour, not talking, just existing in the quiet aftermath of everything that had unfolded. I need to go see Mira, Damien said finally. I've barely seen her in 3 days. She's probably worried. Of course, go, Be with your daughter. Come with me. Sienna looked surprised. What? Come meet Mira. Have dinner with us. See what life looks like when it's not just work and crisis management. I don't want to intrude. You're not intruding. I'm inviting you. Damien stood, offered his hand. Come on. Let me show you what I'm fighting for. What matters more than any company or legacy or revenge. Sienna took his hand and let him pull her up. They picked up Mira from Mrs. Chen's apartment. The moment Mira saw Sienna, her whole face lit up. The sad fancy lady. You came. Her name is Sienna, Damien reminded her. I know. But she looks less sad now. So maybe just fancy lady? Despite everything, Sienna laughed. You can call me Sienna or fancy lady, whatever you prefer. They went back to Damien's small apartment, the one with the pull-out couch and the kitchen barely big enough to turn around in and the second-hand furniture that had seen better days. Damien felt embarrassed showing it to Sienna, this woman who lived in a world of penthouses and corner offices. But Sienna looked around like she was seeing something precious. This is nice, she said. It feels like a home. It's small. Small doesn't mean it's not home. Mira insisted on showing Sienna all her drawings, including the one of her and Damien standing together surrounded by stars. Sienna studied it seriously, like it was fine art. You're very talented, she told Mira. I know. Daddy says I get it from him, from when he used to make music. Sienna looked at Damien. You made music? A long time ago. He doesn't like to talk about it, Mira explained. Because something sad happened and he had to stop. But I think he should start again, because music makes people happy, and Daddy is good at making people happy. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds. Damien felt his throat tighten. They made dinner together, nothing fancy, just pasta and vegetables, and whatever Damien had in the fridge. But sitting around the small table with Mira chattering about school and Sienna asking questions like she actually cared, Damien felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Connection. The sense that maybe, possibly, he'd finally found his way to something real. After dinner, after Mira had gone to bed, Damien and Sienna sat on the pull-out couch with cheap wine in mismatched glasses. Thank you, Sienna said. For today. For all of this. For showing me what matters. You already knew what mattered. You just forgot for a while. I've been fighting alone for so long I didn't know how to do anything else. But you... She looked at him, her eyes soft in the dim light. You showed me it doesn't have to be that way. That fighting with someone is different than fighting alone. We make a good team. We do. Sienna was quiet for a moment. What happens now? With us? With this? Damien knew what she was asking. The question underneath the question. Where do we go from here? I don't know, he said honestly, but I know I'm not going anywhere. I know I care about you. Actually care. Not just professionally. And I know that scares me because the last time I let myself care about someone, I lost her, and it nearly destroyed me. Your wife? Yeah, she died when Mira was 3. Car accident. Sudden. One day she was here, the next she was gone. And I spent years running from anything that might hurt like that again. But you stopped running. I stopped running when I met you, when I saw someone drowning and decided I'd rather risk getting hurt than watch you go under. Damien took her hand. I don't know what this is between us. I don't know where it goes. But I want to find out. If you do. Sienna's eyes filled with tears. I've never had this. Someone who sees me, really sees me, and chooses to stay anyway. Everyone else wants the CEO or the money or the connections. But you just want me. I do, just you, messy and complicated and fighting battles you probably can't win. That's the you I want. Even though I'm a disaster? Especially because you're a disaster. We're both disasters. Maybe that's why we fit. Sienna laughed through her tears. That's the worst romantic declaration I've ever heard. Yeah, well, I'm out of practice. She kissed him then, soft and tentative and tasting of cheap wine and hope. And Damien kissed her back, feeling like he was finally coming home after 8 years of running. When they pulled apart, Sienna was smiling. So what now? Now we go back to work. We fight the battles that need fighting. We build the company into something better than what our parents left us. And we do it together. Together. I like the sound of that. Me too. 6 months later, Lancaster Chen Global held its first board meeting under the new name. Robert Chen sat at the table as an honorary advisor, helping Sienna navigate the complicated politics of corporate leadership. The lawsuit had been withdrawn. The board members who'd conspired against Sienna had resigned. New blood had been brought in, people who cared about building something sustainable rather than just profitable. James Way had invested his $40 million after all, citing Sienna's transparency and courage as the deciding factors. Margaret Torres had become Sienna's mentor, teaching her the lessons Thomas had never bothered to pass down. And slowly, painstakingly, Lancaster Chen Global was becoming the company it should have been from the start, built on partnership rather than betrayal, on integrity rather than ruthlessness. Damien officially joined as Director of Strategic Initiatives, which was a fancy way of saying he helped Sienna see what other people missed and told her the truth when nobody else would. He worked reasonable hours now. Came home for dinner with Mira most nights. Had started composing again. Nothing professional, just music for himself, for the joy of creating something beautiful. Mira had decided that Sienna was her fancy lady and nobody else's, which meant Sienna came to dinner at least twice a week and had learned to make passable pasta and told Mira stories about running a company like they were fairy tales. The three of them had started to feel like something that looked almost like family. It wasn't perfect. Sienna still worked too much. Damien still had nightmares about his past catching up. They fought sometimes about boundaries and trust and the complicated dance of building a relationship while also building a company. But they were fighting together now, which made all the difference. On a random Thursday evening, Damien and Sienna sat in his apartment after Mira had gone to bed, drinking wine and talking about nothing important, and Sienna said something that made Damien's chest tight. I used to think success meant never needing anyone, being so strong, so capable, so perfect that I could handle everything alone. But I was wrong. Yeah? Success is having someone to call when everything falls apart. It's knowing you don't have to face the hard stuff alone. She looked at him. It's you, this, us. That's what success actually looks like. Damien understood, because he'd learned the same lesson. That running away kept you safe, but it also kept you alone. That vulnerability was terrifying but necessary. That letting someone see your worst parts and choosing to stay anyway, that was the bravest thing two people could do. I love you, he said, because it was true, and because he was tired of hiding from truth. Sienna's eyes went wide. You, what? I love you. I'm in love with you. Have been for months. And I know that's terrifying and complicated and probably a terrible idea given that we work together and I'm still figuring out how to be a functioning human and you're running a massive company. But it's true. And I'm done pretending it's not. Sienna was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I love you too. I think I have since the moment you stepped into that ballroom and decided I was worth saving. You were always worth saving. I didn't know that. Not until you showed me. They sat together in the quiet darkness of his small apartment, the city lights filtering through the windows, and Damien thought about everything that had brought them here. The gala, the betrayal, the board meetings and press conferences and painful conversations with family, the choice to stop running and start fighting, the decision to trust someone again even when trust felt impossible. It hadn't been smooth. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been the kind of perfect love story where everything worked out cleanly. But it was real. And messy, and human, and that made it worth everything. Mira appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. I can't sleep. Come here, baby. Damien pulled her onto the couch between him and Sienna. Mira curled up against him, already half asleep again. Are you and the fancy lady going to get married? Damien choked on his wine. What? You look at her the way people look at each other in movies before they get married, and she looks at you the same way, so I was just wondering. Sienna was trying not to laugh. Your daughter is very perceptive. She's a menace. I think it would be nice, Mira said, yawning, if the fancy lady became part of our family. Then I'd have a mom again. Sort of. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating and full of a child's hope. Sienna's eyes were wet. I'd like that too, Mira. Someday. If your dad will have me. He will. Mira said with absolute certainty. He's been sad and alone for a long time, but he's not sad anymore. Because of you. She fell asleep between them, her small body warm and trusting. Damien and Sienna looked at each other over her curly head, and something passed between them that didn't need words. A promise. A future. A choice to build something together that was bigger than either of them alone. It wouldn't be perfect. They'd fight and struggle and make mistakes. They'd have to navigate the complications of blending a family, of running a company together, of healing from wounds that went deeper than either of them wanted to admit. But they'd do it together. And that made all the difference. Because in the end, that's what life was. Choosing to show up for the people you love, even when it's hard. Choosing to be seen, even when vulnerability feels like drowning. Choosing to build something real instead of something perfect. Damien had spent 8 years running from that truth, but he wasn't running anymore. He was home. Finally, impossibly home. And so was Sienna. Two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and decided that broken didn't mean worthless. That scars were just proof you'd survived. That the best kind of love wasn't the kind that fixed you. It was the kind that stood beside you while you fixed yourself. They sat together in the darkness, their daughter sleeping between them, the city humming outside, the future uncertain but no longer terrifying. And for the first time in longer than either could remember, they both believed that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. Not perfect, never perfect, but real, and human, and worth fighting for. And in the end, that was enough.